Talk about raising the bar.
We're very lucky that there are no recognitions after you because I don't think anyone could follow that act. That was absolutely wonderful, especially on the spot. I just had heard it before. It was so adorable. I'm partial to the Labradors and the cow fight song, and you just blended that beautifully. Big round of applause. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. So we're coming back in open session. We're coming out of closed session. We start at 6 o'clock. And any actions that we take in closed session, we report out. So we did take a couple actions. So I'm going to ask Mr. Wenzel if he'd read out.
Yes, first one, in the December 10th, 2019 closed session, the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District Board of Education voted 5-0 to join with other school districts in the electronic cigarette vaping litigation against Juul Labs, Inc. in Federal District Court.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. And we have a second action. I'll ask Mrs. Prusso.
The second one in the December 10th, 2019 closed session, the LVJUSD Board of Education voted 5-0 to join with other school districts in the electronic cigarette vaping civil class action against Juul Labs, Inc.
Thank you. Just some basic meeting procedures. Exits are in the back and on the side. And if anyone has to go up in during the middle and use a restroom facility or anything, or step out with a cell phone, go out into the entry, and the bathrooms are located across the hall. This is the organizational meeting of the Board of Education for Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District. Our primary purpose here is for the education of students within the jurisdiction of this agency. During our meeting, you, our members of the public, will have the opportunity to share your information and ideas, voice concerns regarding matters within the jurisdiction of this public agency. During our discussion on each agenda item, there'll be a time for you to have the opportunity to speak to that item. If the topic is not on the agenda, we would ask and encourage you to please fill out a tan speaker's card, one like this, and these are located in the lobby. If it is on the agenda, then please fill out a blue card, and in either case, take those and hand them in to one of the folks up here with that are doing our IT, and they'll move them around. And we'll call you up in no particular order within that section of our agenda. There's a little clock that'll illuminate on that laptop. It'll say 3 minutes, and we can see it on this side as well. And we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If it starts to look like it might go a little bit long, you get around that 2:30 mark, I might gently remind you that you've got about 30 seconds to kind of close it up. And that's just so we keep our meetings moving, and everyone refrains from any comment while people are speaking, so we're all polite, and we can get a lot of things done in one meeting. Again, just a reminder, these meetings are televised. They're on Channel 28. Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. and Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. And I believe you can also catch them on the internet. Our agendas are posted on the overheads you can see there. We're going into section 4, so you can kind of follow along. And right now we're at changes in the agenda. So I'd ask our superintendent, Dr. Kelly Bowers, if there's any changes.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do not have any changes to the agenda this evening.
All righty. And then we're going to go into our recognitions.
So we will re-invite Mrs. Christy Starkovich to come forward, the very proud principal of Lawrence Elementary, and probably even prouder tonight after that wonderful performance. She will be introducing and honoring some very special volunteers in her and staff members in her community. Oh, looks like all staff members, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Board President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and Cabinet. My name is Christy Starkovich, and as mentioned earlier, I am the proud principal of Lawrence Elementary. It gives me great pleasure this evening to recognize the members of our Leadership Advisory Committee on behalf of all of Lawrence Elementary students, staff, and parents. Currently, we have 8 members on the advisory committee. Unfortunately, only 4 were able to join us tonight, but I'd like to introduce Miss Diana Albernos, Mrs. Tracy Pearson, Mrs. Andrea Rivera, and Mrs. Emily Waffler. And unfortunately, Joyce Gonzalez, Shannon Higgins, Anna Johnson, and Melanie McCullough were not able to be here. So you're probably asking yourself, what is the Leadership Advisory Committee? Last year, Lawrence Elementary was recognized as a first-year Leader in Me school which focuses on Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People. And the first year, as many of you know, really entailed learning the 7 habits and their principles and being able to apply them into our daily lives. For example, a group of intermediate students, our friends, they learned how to distinguish the difference between what was in their circle of control and not in their circle of control. And when situations transpired that weren't in their circle of control, like someone else's actions, they would then stop and remind themselves that, oh, this is not in my circle of control, and stop from being reactive. This is just one of the short examples. By the end of the year, students knew the principles and they were able to teach the habits to others, which was exhibited at our open house. As Lawrence Elementary started out this second year of Leader in Me, we determined that we needed to have 2 additional areas of focus. One was goal setting and monitoring progress, and the other being student leadership and development of worth and potential. So you're hearing a theme here with the leadership. That's where these amazing Leadership Advisory Committee members come into play. Without this committee, students would not have the opportunity to participate in school-wide leadership roles. As students, staff, and parents determine areas of need for leadership, it takes a Lawrence Advisory Committee member to volunteer their time to oversee the role. And they truly do step up and say, oh, that sounds interesting to me, I'll take that on. The adult creates an application which contains the desired skills and requirements, a job description, a reference check that students have to go to a former teacher for, and a personal interest section. Students truly take the application process seriously. Once the applications are turned in to the advisory committee member, they then hold an interview with the candidates. In most cases, the candidates dress for success. Can you imagine what our future would be like if all children learned the skill of thoroughly completing an application and partaking in the interview process? Lawrence students have that opportunity from TK through 5th grade. Once in the leadership role, students then begin to shine, as you can imagine. It's here where they feel involved in the school community and realize their worth and potential. My 2 young ladies behind me. Because of the Leadership Advisory Committee, student leadership is evident within our green team, advertising team, valet squad, pouch passer crew, journalist crew, morning greeter team, library cart delivery crew, and the lost and found specialist team. These will continue to grow. We have a new application that's being developed right now by our 4th grade teachers. So we have obviously seen many impacts in many areas. Students who typically may not be involved in clubs or recognized for special accomplishments are proud to be acknowledged as a Labrador leader. Thank you, Leadership Advisory Committee, for your commitment to our students and our school community. Your dedication and guidance will ultimately have an impact on students for a lifetime.
That's pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi.
Good work. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good work.
Thanks. It's great work. Okay, this is a procedural thing. We're going to convene to our organizational meeting, and this is for the purpose of doing some presentations for some past work.
So at this point, we have Mr. Wenzel, who would like to give some acknowledgement.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. It's my honor and privilege to do a presentation for one of our board members. Happens to be the president of the board, Greg Bueno. For my introduction to Craig, for as many years ago, we came on the board together. had the opportunity to serve on some projects together, but more importantly is the position of president on our board. You represent us excellently. I appreciate all the work that you've done. And I'd like to present you with this plaque in appreciation of Craig Bueno, Board of Education President 2018-2019.
And next, President Bueno would like to recognize our clerk.
Yes. So I'm going to predate a meeting. I've known our clerk, Mr. Rogie, since about 1982. So we actually worked together years and years ago. I was 22. Yeah. We were both very young at the time.
I was 6.
So we've known each other for a long time, over 30 years. And Chuck's been our clerk. He's been our clerk for a long time. Does a great job. The clerk's position, when the president's not here, clerk steps in. But there's also a lot of other things, a lot of signature stuff, and there's a lot of oversight that goes with the role of clerk, and from an administrative point of view, and it has legal authority on a lot of things that help bind the district. So Chuck, you've done a great job for the last year of service. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was 6.1. We're going to move into section 6.2, this is election of the president for the coming year for 2020. And I would entertain any nominations.
Mr. Bueno?
Yes.
I have a strong feeling that it is important that we, each of us, be visible to the community and that the community sees each of us separately in action. So for that end, I would nominate Mr. Wenzel as the most senior person of us who has not been board president, and I would nominate Mr. Wenzel for president.
Okay.
Well, I thank you for that nomination, and I appreciate that. I am involved in the community. I do get seen a lot by a lot of people. But I've got to be honest, with my current involvement with other boards and my work, it's difficult to be at all these events and to represent as well that
And
as
you
I
don't,
should.
you don't feel you could delegate that responsibility on each individual occasion?
I could, but when you take a role on, you're supposed to be that person. And to delegate it, I'd feel like, because as busy as I am,
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to attend the things, and I'd feel bad about it, probably would even affect my health. So, but I thank you for the nomination, but I think it would be unfair to the people and the people I serve. I like to see that person out there, and I put pressure on that person to make sure they're out there and representing us. And to that point, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any nominations, President?
Mr. President, I would like to nominate Craig Bueno for president. I think, again, you're the type of person that represents us well, and you're there, and you're at the meetings, and you come back and talk to us, and I think that you're a proven president here, and I'm not the kind of person that really wants change. I want a person that is doing a great job to stay where they're at. So
I appreciate that.
I nominate you for president.
Thank you.
I second that. I agree. This is my only starting second year, so you're the only board president that I know, but I have felt like you've taken the role and done it well, and especially the evaluation, which was my first evaluation. I thought that was well done, and I think that you're a good representative for us. You're a good representative to the community, and I feel that you enjoy it to a certain level, so I second the nomination.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Wenzel, seconded by Mrs. Prusso. I'd ask the clerk, if there's not any further discussion, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
No.
Myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. So the motion carries 4-1. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to do, this is election of our clerk for the board for 2020. And the motion, I'd like to make the motion. I've worked with Mr. Rogie for quite some time. I think Mr. Rogie does a really good job. He's very involved. He's on a lot of committees, and he does a very good job on those committees. He's involved. He's here. He is a loyalist to his Cowboys, which is a good thing, because I support those Cowboys too. So I would make the motion to nominate current trustee Rogie for the role of clerk of our board for 2020.
Second.
Motion's by Bueno, and it's been seconded by Mr. Wenzel. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, you'd call the roll?
Yes, sorry, Mrs. Pruso.
Aye.
Myself, I, Mr. Wenzel.
A little nervous? Aye.
I got myself messed up. Mrs. White
Aye.
and President Bueno.
Aye. And that's unanimous. Congratulations. Nicely done. Thank you, sir. And we're going to take, it's 7:28, and what do you think? 12 minutes? 12 minutes, so we'll come back at 7:40? 7:40, we're broke. We're going to adjourn till 7:40. There's some refreshments on the side for those here. Come up, have some cookies. All righty, we're going to go ahead and reconvene, 1944 hours, and we're going to start right back up at our regular session at Section 8, and this is our student board member reports. We have 2 comprehensive high schools. Each has an elected member that comes, and they're here every meeting. And so we're going to start off with Livermore High School. Radha Sridharan.
Good evening, Board President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and members of the cabinet. I'm Radha Sridharan, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my amazing Cowboy Nation family. We hope everyone got to enjoy the Thanksgiving week and a week long at home. On sports news, winter sports have officially begun and are in season. Boys soccer are 4-0. Boys basketball is playing Thursday night at home at 7 p.m. Make sure to come and support the boys. Girls soccer is playing tonight at Newark, and girls basketball is playing at Benicia as we speak. Let's hope the girls are doing well. Vivian Valentin placed 19th in her division for the state cross-country meet. 3 of our golfers from the girls team played at the NCS tournament. On music news, band will have a concert tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at the LHS Theater. String quartet will be performing at Page Mill Winery on Thursday at 6 p.m. Over the past 2 months, our music department has been growing and booming. Marching band has received 25 awards in total from their competitions this year. Our choir is caroling around campus to spread the holiday cheer next week. Show and chamber choir will be performing at the Lomar Valley Dance Theater's Nutcracker performance. Our 2020 Mr. Cowboys have been announced, and they will be having their first meeting on Thursday. Our boys are excited to get their pageant game on. At our last parent education night, Horizons discussed about recognizing anxiety and depression in our children and teens. The next one is on February 4th, and they will discuss about social media and dangerous teen behaviors. Leadership is underway and hosting Operation Gratitude this week for students to write letters to our troops serving our country. LHS leadership is gearing up for the holiday season and is planning various events to give back to our school community and most of all, our teachers. Livermore High School would like to wish everyone a safe and joyous holiday season, and as always, stay humble and kind, and it'll always be a great day to be a cowboy. Thank you.
Thank you, Radha. Now we're going to go to Granada High School. Riley Mora.
Good evening, Board President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and Cabinet. My name is Riley Mora, and tonight I speak on behalf of my peers at Granada High School. Granada students are well into their second trimester, and they're working diligently as students, activists, and athletes. For example, Granada's boys basketball team has been successful as they have won all 6 games thus far, and Granada's girls soccer team won 1 game and lost the other. Regardless, the girls soccer team is now prepared to enter the league game phase of their season, which begins in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the Me to We Club is currently planning Adopt a Family, an initiative which seeks to bring holiday gifts to local low-income families. This project is particularly special because students unite and work to fundraise for a project that may directly impact one of their own peers. This is an ongoing fundraiser, and Granada families are encouraged to get involved in any way they can. In addition, I am proud to announce Granada High's newest club, the Asian American Club, which offers students a space to learn about Asian American culture. On the topic of academic pursuits, the IB students will turn in their extended essays tomorrow morning. This essay is required to obtain the full IB diploma, and it is truly an incredible accomplishment. This essay requires students to produce original research in a 4,000-word essay on their topic of choice. AP students also continue to tackle the content of their curriculum, and exam preparation will begin in trimester 3. Granada students enjoyed a week-long break for the Thanksgiving holiday, but have now returned and are expected to work diligently for the next 3 weeks until they get to enjoy yet another break for the winter holidays. Thank you.
Thank you both. Nicely done. We're going to move into Section 9. This is our opportunity for our employee associations to come up, give us an update on their membership. And so this evening, we have Livermore Education Association, California CSEA, and SEIU. With the LEA, it's normally Kate Sorrell, the president, and I think she's feeling a little bit under the weather. So we're not going to have a speaker this evening. And then we have CSEA's Mamie Kristovich, and SEIU is Teresa Jennings, and then our confidential is Cindy Hotzenbuehler Martinez. And so there's no reps, so we're going to move into Section 10. This is communication from the public. Communication from the public is the time for our public to comment either in writing or verbally on any item that is not on the agenda. And we, the board, may listen to the comment, and we can ask staff clarifying questions, but we can either take action or discuss the matter within this meeting, and that's in accordance with the Brown Act. I believe I have one tan card, and so I'm going to call, I'll make sure I get it right. Gia Oshowitz? Is it Oshowitz? Oshowitz, okay, long O. If you'd like to come up, please. You come up and properly state your name and have a seat and make sure that the microphone's on. There's a little green button at the bottom.
Good evening. My name is Gia Oshowitz, and I'm a sophomore at Granada. Recently, I took the ACT at Tracy High School, and I noticed that in their bathrooms, they provided free feminine hygiene products for their students. I didn't really notice that these products weren't really available for Granada students until I realized they were available for Tracy High students. And I asked a bunch of other female students, and every single person I talked to said they would greatly appreciate having these products available for Granada students. Not only would it improve the overall hygiene of the school, but it would alleviate some of the stress that accompanies being a teenager who is in high school, as we would no longer feel the nervousness of trying to, hide like a feminine hygiene product as we leave the classroom, or scrambling trying to find a friend who has an extra product available for us to borrow. I was doing some research, and I found this company called Ant Flow that helps schools provide free feminine hygiene products for their students. So I thank you guys for listening, and I really hope that this proposal will be considered.
Thank you very much. Now, we can't.
Isn't there a new law that says it has to be provided, or is it only for certain schools?
So my understanding of the law is that for students with a high poverty level, which possibly Tracy High qualifies for, but so in our district, we do provide adjunction for the at the middle school level. So if it's a high enough poverty level, we need to provide them, but it doesn't, that's the minimum requirement that we have to by law. It doesn't mean that we can't go beyond and provide beyond to other schools, even if they are not as impoverished. So that's my understanding of the law. Is that correct?
I guess what I would ask, maybe if we could just look into and bring back to the board, maybe the cost, if we were to extend the program, as the speakers brought up, maybe just do a little benefit analysis or something, and bring it back to us at a timely date, maybe in January.
I know we don't treat all our schools exactly the same, but that seems to be such a basic thing.
I believe that all secondary schools have them available in the nurse's office, but I think what you saw was a much easier way to access it, and certainly something that our staff can research. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Nicely done.
So I just have to say a little bit about Gia, because I've known Gia for quite a few years, and not to embarrass her, but hopefully, well, I didn't embarrass her because you don't even know what I'm going to say, Mr. Menchak. I met her as a student in Mendenhall, and she had brought to our attention something different that I also listened to. She had said that at Mendenhall there were many things for students who excelled and loved math. I mean, there was math counts, and then there was the science and the Rube Goldbergs and Science Odyssey and all these things. And her affinity was language arts and writing. She's a gifted writer and loves to express herself and in that way. And she just didn't feel that there was enough for that, even though she was already in honors classes. And so I went back to my high school and middle school days when I was in journalism and had a school paper. So she spearheaded the idea of a school paper for Mendenhall, which started as a club, then ended up becoming a class. And I think she was one of the editors, but then many, many other students benefited. And now that has been ongoing. It's now one of the most popular elective classes at the school. And I get invited to see their printed publications. So I think it's a wonderful example of activating student voice, having adults listen, and then making change. So it's just really exciting. So I'm not going to ask you to sing like the other students, but I wanted to sing your praises about your gift of leadership.
Alrighty. And thank you. You know, one thing that's, to me, is just, it's so change in society is the fact that we can actually, and it's a positive change, that we can actually discuss stuff like that in public. And you know what I mean? You could actually have that conversation and bring it forward. Because there wasn't that long ago that you couldn't even, yeah. And to me, that's great that kids are, you know, that young adults be able to come in and address things and make change. We have no other speaker cards. We're going to move into 10B. This is correspondence. Formal written correspondence to this Board of Education shall be acknowledged if received by the board or in the superintendent's office by 4 p.m. the day before our meeting. Formal written correspondence received after the cutoff time will be acknowledged at our next meeting. Electronic communication received via the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District website with all fields completed and verified shall be treated as official written correspondence. So all that being said, I would ask our clerk, newly elected, long-serving, Mr. Rogie, if there's any correspondence, and if so, if you'd please summarize.
Yes, Mr. President, we have one. Alan Heckman, community member, formal board correspondence received from email. Mr. Heckman requested specific documents from the district regarding contracts by the Goodby-McGuire Research per Public Records Act. I'd also like to note that these documents were provided by Deputy Superintendent Chris Van Schack on November 22nd.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
it.
We're going to move into section 11. This is our information discussion items. And I'd ask our superintendent if you'd introduce the first one.
Certainly, thank you. So we will invite Mrs. Kim McNeely, our director, our bond program director, forward. She will be presenting a Measure J bond update for information only.
Thank you. President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and Cabinet, I'm here to present the Measure J bond program update for you this evening. Thank you. I'm going to start us off with a matrix that's now fairly familiar to the board, and it's something that we post on our webpage as well. This is our program project matrix, and we have updated it for you this evening. I've added some check marks next to items that have been completed since the last update was provided to you in August of this year. And we have also noted with ends projects that have been added since that August update as well. I'm going to talk more about those as we move forward, but I just wanted to note those for you and for the community. I'm going to start us off with the video projection and voice enhancement system project. We're moving into our final phase of this project, but as of the past year, we have accomplished over 750 classroom upgrades to the new standard, which is an exciting accomplishment. We are now moving into the final phase of that project, which includes installation at multipurpose rooms, libraries, and media centers throughout the district. As you can see, that project will begin right after the first of the year, and we'll move into the early part of summer and conclude. Just a couple of quick reminders, probably more for the public than the board. I think you're pretty familiar with the project. This project was moved forward in a couple of phases, or a couple of installation approaches, a classroom wall installation, as you can see in this image, and then we also did ceiling mounted installation where that was possible in our classrooms. And again, just a quick reminder. Moving on to East Avenue, the summer work at East Avenue has concluded. That was, as you'll recall, setting the stage for the new classroom building that we will be beginning shortly. What this included was several building moves to clear the way for the new building pad, and underground utility installation and infrastructure on that campus. And we are also implementing something that were actually simple but important in terms of moving the project forward. We now have a construction staging area just to the south of the campus. This is actually adjacent to the skate park. This will provide access to our construction site on the campus, and we believe greatly enhance the safety on that campus. As the community and the board is aware, it's a very tight site, so having the ability to access away from students and to keep those traffic areas separate was a really important part of getting ready for this project. We also have completed the first portion of the permanent parking improvements at the Livermore High School campus, and this is just a throwback picture, a little bit of a reminder of where we started earlier this spring. And this is the final product on the campus for the north parking lot. I think it really updates our street presence and makes the community interface at 4th Street just much more appealing and cleaner for the campus. We're also moving forward with the temporary parking lot project. That is actually underway, as probably many of you have seen. This will allow us, if you'll recall, to use the current student parking lot as a staging area for the new building as we begin construction there. So the work on this project will continue over the winter break and will complete in January. Part of this project, as well as we're doing some cleanup on this area of the campus, trying to remove some residual debris and things that have been longstanding and help the campus out a little bit with some reorg in that area. And we're also doing improvements to the agricultural program area to support the program as we're taking up some of part of their space for this temporary parking lot.
And just to emphasize, that's a temporary staff parking lot.
It is, in fact. Thank you. Temporary and staff, both.
That's not temporary staff, but
No.
temporary parking lot. We want to keep our staff.
The staff
Sorry.
are fairly permanent.
I got to
yeah.
get.
So moving on, in addition, we were in the process of doing the temporary work, trying to address some neighbor concerns that were identified as part of that process. Those improvements have now been complete as well, and they include adding crosswalk and stop sign at Pistana. That's actually the image that you see here at School Street. We have also added stop signs and crosswalks on Oregon at Rose and at Jensen Street. And we have removed a few parking stalls across from Pistana to keep that area open and clear for the neighbors. And that was, again, in response to some concerns and questions that they had. While we were at it, we also did some restriping around the campus to improve safety. We have a lot of traffic flow around the campus, so the crosswalks are now much more visible around the campus. They meet current city standards. In addition, we added striping, formalizing the drive lanes on Cowboy Alley to try to keep the cars a little more straight and have it be clearer where the path was for vehicles as they drive through the campus. And you can see some of those improvements as you're out on the campus as well. Work continues at Granada High School. This is just a brief reminder, and I won't review of the project scope and the schedule. I will remind you, though, that we are on track, as we indicated, for completion of the athletics building in January, and that we are also continuing to move forward toward our scheduled completion in March for the pool project. So I'm going to share a few more images of that as we move in here. Just again, a quick reminder of the goal, the target, if you will, of the building that we're trying to create on the campus. And this is actually a current image. It's starting to look an awful lot like the rendering, which is exciting. This is about a week old. The building's really taking shape, and we're in the process of drying in at this point, which will help us start to move things forward quite a bit more quickly. But good progress happening on that building. Probably the most exciting thing this evening, at least for me personally, is that we hit a significant milestone in this project on November 16th when we began pouring the foundation for the pool. That allowed us, if you'll recall in prior conversations, to be able to mitigate water issues. Once we got the foundation poured, water became really virtually a non-issue on the pool portion of the project. So this is, the image shows the form and rebar that was in place as I took the picture about midnight on the 16th before we began pouring out there, and I have a few more to share because it's pretty exciting, at least in our world. So this is, the site was set up as a staging area for several pumper trucks. We put a large concrete pumper out in place to feed the pump that you actually see pouring concrete into the pool and placing it. Concrete placement began on this project 2:30 in the morning on the 16th. The dive tank portion of the pool took approximately 4 hours of the 7.5-hour pour to complete. As previously discussed, this was a continuous concrete pour, so we have no cold joints in the pool, and we poured over 400 yards of concrete that evening. 47 concrete trucks came on the site over the 7.5 hours we were pouring. And I think it completely illustrates the really good thinking of staff in doing this at night. It was a complete non-issue. We did notice neighbors, as is our protocol, but we received 0 complaints, and the contractor really did a beautiful job of managing noise and light and keeping it safe for our kids, most importantly. So I think it turned out to be a really good decision from the project management team. After the dive tank pour, the balance of the pool pour was about 3.5 hours, believe it or not. So once the system got going and they got out of the dive tank, it moved actually very, very quickly. The pour concluded about 9:30 on Saturday morning, and we finished, then concrete finishing occurred for another 3 hours after that. So this is what you see as the concrete was finished at the end of that morning or early afternoon. So the total process, again, took about 11 hours. We are now set up for installation of the Murtha pool system that we have contracted for, which is a really exciting thing for us. And overall, a really, really successful activity. We were very, very pleased with the performance of the entire team. We haven't been consistently able to say that, but this actually went off perfectly, and they did a really nice job managing the process. Several other projects are coming soon. We're scheduled to bring forward to you the recommendation for award of contract in January for the East Avenue project. We're very excited about that. We just concluded our contractor conversations after the RFP process, and we are set to go. The project looks good, the scoping is very good, the schedule looks good, and budget is on track. So we're excited to bring that to you, and we'll be talking about that in much more detail in January. And for Joe Mitchell and Livermore High School, we are on schedule to be out for proposals by February. We're expecting by mid-January to be out with contractor pool for the leaseback contractors to give us proposals, and we anticipate at this point recommending award of those contracts in March or April. So for us, another big milestone because it will allow us to have all of the 4 major projects under contract this fiscal year. Finally, this evening, I wanted to just take this opportunity to acknowledge that it takes a lot of district partners to implement these projects, and we don't often get the opportunity to share how integral these folks are in helping us move projects forward. Their help and expertise as partners has allowed us to solve problems ahead of time, to work collaboratively to meet the needs of our community and our students, and we are very grateful for that. And I wanted to officially this evening, because I don't know that I have recently at least, say thank you to these various agencies. Many departments in the city of Livermore, Parks and Recreation, went out of their way to find a way for us to stage at East Avenue. Zone 7 has been incredible in helping us with water management at Granada. The Housing Authority helped us figure out how to get a temporary parking lot at Livermore High School. The Livermore Pleasanton Fire Department are constant partners in reviewing the safety on of our campuses. We have ongoing meetings with St. Michael's as a near and dear neighbor at Livermore High School, and the cemetery at St. Michael's was incredibly patient with us over the summer as we did a lot of earthwork right next to them. So I again wanted to just publicly thank them for the support and expertise. I know it will continue, but we're grateful for everything that's happened thus far.
And included in the city of Livermore is the traffic and the engineers, as well as city leadership, because there's a lot of permitting processes.
Planning department,
and
you
then
name it,
and
yeah.
then also the police department who came out and looked at all of those safety features with us and all that. So we just want to make sure, if we're going to recognize fire, representing these two here, we need to make sure that we represent police, because they were really helpful. And I just, something to ponder before your comments or throughout your comments is how we might thank them if our board would like us to draft a formal letter of thanks from our board to some of these agencies, if that would be something nice, or some other kind of recognition to thank them, because this will be the first time they've really helped on this type of a large scale project, but it won't be the last. And so sometimes they don't get the appreciation either. So, something to think about.
If I could follow up on that as well, We have implemented this year meetings, regular meetings with all of these agencies, and so these are ongoing dialogues that they have committed to make sure that we're partnering at every chance that we get. And that has been instrumental in proactively resolving things and working through issues. So every agency that was listed there, we meet with on a regular basis to just continue dialogue and collaboration. So that concludes my comments with those great suggestions, and I would be happy to entertain comments or questions.
Thank you very much. Before we get started on the comments, we maybe just like a head nod, just we can, would we be okay, maybe just drafting up some kind of a letter specifically to each of the agencies? Yeah, and maybe if you could just assist, because sometimes if it's more than generic, you're having the actual hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So if Mary Jones was particularly helpful, and so we do something like that, an individual letter, and we could all do it, and, okay.
Notice made to the neighborhoods. Part of that notice was a thank you and that for
30 in the morning.
always good, something to follow up on if we can.
We're actually in the process of setting up project-specific listservs to update the surrounding neighbors as we begin doing projects, but we notice all neighborhoods before we begin construction. We give them cell phone numbers so they can specifically call if they have questions and issues. And then we're actively monitoring during the projects as well. I was out walking most of the night at Granada High School to make sure that noise and sound wasn't bleeding into neighborhoods any more than necessary. And again, the contractor did a really good job of minimizing. I would say out on Wall Street, there was actually very little disruption to neighbors. Light was angled appropriately. We had flagged people so we didn't have to use backup alarms. A lot of mitigation went into making it as pain-free as possible.
Thank you. We're going to begin with Mrs. Prusso.
Okay, I just have a few sort of clarifying questions. Is there ever any overlap on phases? I know, like, especially if they're different projects, maybe at the same school. Like, for example, like at East Avenue, you have the new building, but then you also have the gym. Or you're doing one project at a time?
It is totally determined on how we actually scope the work, but we do provide a specific scope, and we do go through DSA, Division of State Architect, approval and review for specific scope. So we have some ability to decide what that scope is, but then once that's determined and submitted, that is the scope for the work.
Okay, so it's like that at a time. And then my question, and then I just, let's see. Also, if on your chart here, if it's been through, if it has approval but it hasn't started construction, or is it just under, sorry, I'm just trying to get all the words correct. Like you have a design development, you have in DSA review. If it's in DSA review, is the next step construction, or is contract maybe is the next step, or
Yeah, there's a couple steps. So DSA review, obviously DSA approval is the next step. We are required by law to have DSA approval before we or you as a board enter into contract. So the next step after that would be putting it out for proposal or bid, depending on the process, and then award.
Okay, and then scoping and design development or design refinement. Can you tell me the order? Sorry.
It's actually kind of a nuance in the process, and they're kind of two different things, largely one of them based on board direction. So design development is the step before we actually authorize the architect to go into construction documents.
Okay.
So we're developing the scope, what we think the work should look like, and then once we finalize that, then they will actually move into construction documents. So for East Avenue, that would be the example. In the case of design refinement, that was based on board direction last spring when the board rejected bids at Mitchell and asked us to go back and do a little bit more work. So that's a little different terminology than you might see typically, but that's what that's specific to.
Okay, I was just curious about the differences in those. And then I was just going to ask about the increment 2 staging area at East Avenue. Is that on campus, or is that?
It is not. It is on, we have now come to learn, it is on city-owned land that is leased by LARPD, so it was a three-way agreement to clear that property for us.
Is it across the bike path? Where?
It actually, what we're going to do is reroute part of the bike path and actually take the portion that runs right behind the cemetery on our campus for staging so that we aren't crossing it, and they've agreed to reroute the path nearer to the skate park during construction.
Okay, that was my only question, is I was just worried about the bike path and there
Yes,
being an
no,
issue there.
we
Okay.
are completely off the bike path.
Okay, I think that was all, except that I just wanted to say that nobody called me for the concrete pour.
Yay.
No, I mean, I was gonna be there.
Oh, you wanted to, we're going to do another one, is the
Okay,
good
like-
news. Yeah, we're going to do another one.
Posted on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got boots and
It was,
everything.
it was actually a lot of fun. I mean, you probably could tell, right? It was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. It was worth watching.
Yeah.
So anyway, it looks great. I'm glad that's done,
Breakfast
but
at
yeah,
6.
congratulations on that.
Thank
So,
you,
and
Ms.
I said the same thing, and she said, there's another one coming in at Livermore High, so we'll come and we'll wear our little helmets, and
I'm
we can get
serious.
those little lantern lights on our forehead,
We'll do a party.
And we'll bring
do a-
donuts.
A pouring party.
or coffee, or something nutritious.
Breakfast is served at 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to sign my name in the pool, the bottom of the pool.
Stay back from the edge. Thank you, Mrs. Prusso. We're going to go, Mr. Rogie?
Emily asked a couple of my questions. So the egress or the access for East Avenue's staging area is back along the fence through their gate, and I imagine you're building a road to
So-
access.
Yes, so we're going to take access along the cemetery. We're going to take about 30 feet into the site, and we've all coordinated all this through the campus and figured out how we're going to actually maintain student program. But it's the least disruptive, and it allows us to enter and access for deliveries on our site predominantly through that. There will be rare occasion where we will have to work with the campus to coordinate a fire lane access, but most of the work will be staged, materials will be stored, and we will bring on the site that direction.
The Livermore High site, I was curious, and I meant to ask you this last week, but why didn't the parking lot at the north end of the field get fenced? It's open.
That was never part of creating the perimeter on the campus so that it could be used after hours. I would have to do more research because that decision was made and the design was given to me as I came on board, but I believe it was part of a conversation of keeping that available and open and just securing the perimeter of the campus.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of wondering about the security aspect of it, but no, that's fine. Kudos on the restriping and everything that happened around the campus off of Cowboy Alley. Delineating the 2 lanes now is really a great idea because people do understand where they're supposed to be driving now. And the crosswalks are definitely eye-popping. You can see where you need to be going, and other drivers can actually see that there is a crosswalk there, especially on School Street. The striping and everything there just really makes it a lot safer. So that was really, they've done a really good job. The only thing I would have asked is they done something more with the crosswalks in front of the school on Maple. That one's I've been almost knocked off twice on that place at night. So maybe it's something to look into. But yeah, kudos on that. The Granada High pour, you said there's going to be a secondary pour at that?
I'm sorry, say that
A
again.
secondary pour at Granada High walls?
Oh, they're going to pour Livermore.
Oh, that's Livermore. So
Livermore,
you're
when we
done.
poured it was kind of a joke. When we poured the pool at Livermore High, we'll get to do it again. So you'll get another
Yeah,
chance.
it's some time away though.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everything is looking really good. Now, the other thing I'd like to, I'm seeing the projects completed and all that. I'd like to get a fiscal accounting of cost and stuff for each step that's been completed and actually just how much money we've got left to do things.
So part of our partnership is with Ms. Kinder. And so we meet every 2 weeks, actually, to review the fund and to review status on our budgets. So we can get information to you as current as this month.
That
So
would be
happy to provide
That would be
that for you.
appreciated, so we get an idea what
So we can do
the
that for
spendings
the
are.
Friday memo and with the monthly, but we also have planned in mid-spring a larger Measure J update for our board about kind of all the projects and where we are in all of those things. And then clearly the bond audit tonight will touch on the money from anything that was spent the last fiscal year. But that's also, we're going to get, this is a monthly update right now, and so we'll give you that, but also we are going to have this larger kind of celebration of all that's Measure J to share. And I think the Bond Oversight Committee also wants to prepare something. There'll be either a video and or some kind of a brochure or something that's going to be publicizing what, all the things that are happening with Measure J. So, not just for our board, but also for the community to know where their funds are going.
On the pool, projecting any delays because of rain, or you factored that in already?
In terms of Livermore High School?
No, Granada.
Granada. Actually, the biggest water, if you will, issue was getting this foundation poured. We have very little water impact now that the foundation's in place. Maybe some incidental, but virtually no impact from water at this point.
All right, and we'll be having a pool party in the spring?
We are counting on it, yes.
Cool.
We've already talked about trying to get in first, ahead of you guys in the
Bill,
race.
he has to have his hands tied behind his head.
That's what I suggested, right.
Yeah, the Biondi swimmer family.
Thank you very much. Great report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogi. We'll move to Mr. Wenzel.
Thank you for your report. The best thing I heard out of this was we're on time. Everything's going well. I mean, I know the weather played a big part of it. We didn't get the rains until late. So on all the projects and everything, we're looking, when people ask, everything's looking good. I mean, I hate to jinx us. So that's good to hear. And now the pictures here on the north parking lot at Livermore, and I see all these trees. Could you remind me, because I'm sure Mr. Rogi was going to say something about it. So when you look at this other picture and limited trees, but how did this work out again to replace the trees that were removed?
We are doing a 2-for-1 tree replacement, including this and the temporary parking lot. And probably an update I'll bring to you in the next couple months is we've already been working with the campus for some beautification efforts that would let us replant those trees and do some delineation of spaces and sort of beautify, not to give too much away, but potentially doing a little more buffering with Leahy Square and trying to do a little bit more to beautify that edge of the campus and to create more of an edge on the field area. So we're reviewing all of that with the campus, but we've actively been working with a landscape architect on doing some additional beautification with the replacement trees.
Excellent. No, I've walked around, seen it. It's looking great, and look forward to seeing some more good things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. To Mrs. White.
Yes, there's 2 items on the consent calendar, resolutions, and they seemed, I know I asked about it and I haven't internalized the explanation I got. We can either talk about it now or we can talk about it before we vote with the consent calendar. But it seems to me that those resolutions are saying we're asserting our authority over this property rather than subordinate to the city. Is that basically what we're doing?
I'm not sure that I would characterize it that way.
Well,
So let me try a
a
little different angle on it. So what we're doing is confirming that as an independent district, we have the right to plan on our own property. And
Okay.
the city had suggested to us that that was a cleaner way to approach the process. I will say in my career, I have not done that previously, but I defer to the expertise of the city who felt that that was a cleaner way to approach the process and recommended that we explore it. We in fact did the same approval at Livermore High School in, I believe, June, and we are now following up at their encouragement and request for these other 2 campuses.
But we're not doing anything that would be contrary-wise to their overall plan for the neighborhood and the
Absolutely,
city and
everything
all.
we're doing is
just,
consistent with city zoning and with,
We're
and
just
we
a-
follow all city requirements. We're required to comply with uniform building code just as the city is. So there's absolutely nothing different that we're doing.
And why are
It's
we doing
really-
this?
It's an affirmation.
Excuse me.
Again, the city's recommendation that it's a cleaner way to affirm that we are an independent district and we have the right to plan our own property. They just felt it was a cleaner approach.
What would happen if we wanted to do something, build a 3-story building that was sort of out of keeping with the neighborhood, I wonder?
We would go through our full process and would ultimately have to comply with all setback requirements and all of the same requirements regardless. I think that they just believe it's cleaner for us to take those issues and not complicate things
Yeah,
with
okay.
2 entities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. We're going to revisit with Mr. Rogi.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel, for broaching my favorite subject on the trees. Just in a passing thing, when we was down at the conference down in San Diego, I did have talked to a couple schools had just finished building their projects, and so I asked them about trees. And I thought one novel approach from one of their botany experts was to put fast-growing trees like white birches and stuff that fill up the area but are short-lived, 5, 7, 8 years. And that gives those other trees a chance to get in to fill in that area also. Just a suggestion. They seem to have some good luck with it.
It's an interesting idea. I'll run it by our landscape architect. Yeah. that's
Thank
an
you.
Interesting idea.
Thank you, Mr. Rogi. Great job on the report. We always appreciate the updates. And I don't think it could be overstated that these aren't improvements to our schools. I see these as transformational projects. To me, this is changing the way education will be delivered in the city of Livermore. These are big projects that are actually going to change and improve the educational experience for hundreds and, thousands of kids. There's 14,000 kids in the district, and they're going to go K through 12 here. So these are big projects. And if there's, I don't know if there's any desire besides my own to actually at some point, as we maybe incrementally, but the one project, this one that's been completed, I'd like to actually see some student, teacher, maybe input before it's forgotten, before it's taken for granted, so we can kind of do a comparative based on the video, audio systems that have been put in the classroom. There's kids who actually had an experience the way it was, and there's kids who are going to experience the way it is. And to me, that input would be not just so much from a gratification sense, but just from a point of looking at it, did we improve it? Did it help? Because sometimes it's easy in this position or as an adult to say, yeah, this was great, and I think it is. But I just think it would be, at some point, I don't know if there's desire beside my own, just to be able to have some kind of a presentation by students and teachers to see if it helped them. I mean, if it's making a difference and how they're using it. We do these improvements, and I think it's important looking forward as you do other projects. So, great work. Thanks for giving us the yardage on the concrete. Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We can introduce the next.
Certainly, and I see Dr. Kevin Greer coming forward. He is our Director of Curriculum, and he will be providing for information to our board, information and updates about our assessment and accountability.
All right. You're all set up here. Thank you. Hi, good evening, Board President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and Cabinet. Tonight I will present the assessment report for the 2018-19 school year, because this is data from last year. I'll be providing a review of academic test results that make up the California Assessment of Student Progress and Performance, or the CASP, as people know it. So, our Livermore students. So this is a graphic. I just wanted to give you something to give a little bit of a kind of a background on the demographic makeup of our students. Our district really is a really solid mirror of the state of California. Within our demographics, we held very much close to the same. I think the only one that we saw kind of what I would call maybe a significant increase was our Asian population. Students who identify as Asian had an increase of 1%, but pretty much everyone else stayed right about where they were, and it does kind of mirror well within the state. Here's a quick review just of the CASP and what goes into this. The Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, or SBAC, is the company that designs the assessment tool that California chose to give to its students. The SBAC tests students that are in grades 3 through 8 plus 11. And they do it in areas of English, they do it math, and they've now done it in science. And they're all based around the California state standards. The tests are computer adaptive, so let's remind ourselves on computer adaptive, it means that the students take the test on a computer and that the questions adapt to the students and will go deeper into the grade level standards as the students answer the questions correctly. So it kind of adapts with their responses. And this is actually the 5th year of our SBAC data. So this, for kind of those who get their math geek on, gives us a great opportunity to see trends within the data. So this is a chart that will represent the percentage of students who met or exceeded state standards by grade level in the area of language arts. The top line, or the orange colored line, indicates the average percentage by grade level for Alameda County. And then the gray colored line would indicate the state average by grade level. As you can see in the area of English language arts, our students as a whole are above the state and county averages in all grade levels. And then the other additional thing is, if you look at it, each of the grade levels has reached at least 60% of its students meeting or exceeding grade level standards, and that's great progress moving forward. Looking further at the English language arts for trends and such, these charts represent the past 5 years of cumulative ELA results by the state, county, and Livermore. If you look at it all, the Livermore is the one on the far right, and so the average percentage of Livermore students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 in 2018-19 who met or exceeded standards exceeded those of the students across the county by 6%, and they outperform or outpace the students across the state by 12%. In addition, the data reveals that we have continued to remain above the state and county averages for each of the past 5 years. That's fairly significant. And furthermore, the data also indicates that our district has shown continuous improvement over each of those past 5 years. When we break it down a little further and we look at ethnicity, this is an aggregate, a chart of the aggregate averages for English language arts over the past 5 years, broken out by the district's kind of largest ethnic student groups. With regard to the ELA data breakdown by ethnicity, all of the ethnic groups, with the exception of the African American student group, maintained or increased the percentage of students who met or exceeded standard. Now, I went on and dug a little deeper, and this year our Hispanic students showed the largest gain among all ethnic student groups as well. So they ended up having 1% above in terms of growth as a group. When we move over to looking at it by student group, this would be looking at English learners, reclassified, fluent English proficient, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and students with disability. You kind of can see that it's imperative for our district, or it's really beneficial for our students as well, to reclassify our English learners when appropriate, given that the data shows how our reclassified students outperform the average or the total average of our students taken when you look at it as a whole, with 68% of our reclassified fluent English proficient students meeting or exceeding on English language arts as compared to previously where it was 63%. In addition, the data also shows that our students are making progress. To be pointed out too, and I know Mr. Salvaggio is in the background, students with disabilities as a student group continued to make steady progress and showed a 6% increase over last year and a combined 9% gain over the past 5 years. I think that's fairly worth recognizing that there's some substantial gains being made within that group. This is a new chart, a different way to kind of show some information. This is looking at grade levels over time, but also if you follow the color lines, if you follow the yellows and the oranges and the blues and the greens, those are cohorts moving through time as they would move from grade level to grade level, progressing down from grade 3 to grade 11. Because we have 5 years worth, it's kind of fun to look at it this way. So this chart above displays the percentage of students that met or exceeded state standards in language arts over the past 5 years. The chart compares each grade level cohort, those are the color strands, over the time in which each has been tested during the past 5 years. The data would reveal that nearly every grade level cohort, with the exception of 11th grade, made steady growth in each subsequent grade level beginning in grade 3. So if you were to follow like the yellow one from 3rd grade in 2015, they went from 53 to 56 to 55 to 62 to 68. So as they progress throughout the grade levels, they have increased in the number or the average of students who have met or exceeded. Then there's another characteristic in this chart. If you just consider the rows going across, looking at 3rd grade in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, you'll also see that the each grade level, not a cohort, but each grade level, new set of students every time, has shown continuous improvement each year. So again, just to pick a thing, 53, 58, 57, 59, 60. So as they continue to move to the right, each entering 3rd grade has done better than the previous 3rd grade had done. This fact indicates that the students are improving in their ability to demonstrate their understanding of grade level standards, which is important. And additionally, teachers are consistently improving their instructional practices in preparing students to meet those grade level standards and in preparing them to handle the SBAC test. Then we'll switch over and look at math for a little bit. The orange, again, line, it indicates the average percentage by grade level for Alameda County, and the gray colored line, or the lower line on there, indicates the state average by grade level. And as you can see, our students are above the state and county averages in all grade levels. Then we would break the same thing down, looking at it from a 5-year trend as a whole, 3rd through 8th plus 11th grade. And this chart would depict that trend. And this year, the percentage of students who met or exceeded standards surpassed those of students across the county by a percent and outperformed students across the state by 10%, which is really noteworthy. And also of note is the fact that the math scores continue to show steady increase over the 5-year period, improving by 6% over the same period. So language arts, we saw 5 percentage points worth of growth over 5 years. In math, we've seen now 6% over that same 5-year period. Definitely still indicates that there is work to do, but it is kind of nice to see that the outpacing of how it's going. When we break it down by ethnicity, and we look at, again, the 4 most significant ones, you'll see that our math data sorted by ethnic student groups reveals a positive gain in nearly all 4 of the largest ethnic groups. Our Hispanic Latino students, if you look 5 years ago till now, has seen a 5% gain over the past 5 years. Our Caucasian student group has improved by 6% over the same period, and our Asian student group has seen a 10% increase. While our African American student group has kind of remained nearly constant, they are approximately double the state and the county average in the area of mathematics. I went back to just look at just that. And also of note is that our African American student population, in terms of the number of students who are eligible taking the test during 3rd through 8th grade and 11th grade, does have some volatility in it due to the sample size of students that would be in that particular group. Math trend by student group, those same things. If you look at it over the 5 years, our district has seen gains in nearly all of these student groups. Again, pointing out our students with disabilities have increased 7% over the 5-year period. That actually is outperforming the 6% that the district as a whole did. So again, over that same 5-year period, that's really nice to see. Our socioeconomically disadvantaged student group actually reflected a 5% increase over 5 years. Again, that's actually fairly good because, again, if you're looking at the district as a whole for 6%, we had maintained 5, which is really good. Obviously, we could make more ground on there. And our reclassified fluent English proficient learners, if you take a look at them, have seen the largest gains. They've seen a 12% gain over that 5-year period of time in the area of mathematics. So then I included the same kind of colorful chart that shows both the cohorts going on an angle or a diagonal and the grade level bands kind of going across the top. And here what you'll take a look at is that in terms of the grade level rows, looking across left to right, you'll see that there's been continuous improvement over each subsequent year. The exception is 11th grade, where it started at 47, 48, 49, 46, 42. Kind of gone a little bit backwards, but it's there. This fact would again indicate that the students are improving in the grades 3 through 8 in their ability to demonstrate their understanding of grade level standards, and the teachers are improving. If you're looking at the diagonals, the cohort line, you will see that it's kind of a mixed bag, if you just kind of look at some of the colors, pick a color and follow it from left to right diagonally. You'll see that we had 2 groups kind of trending down, 2 groups trending up, and 3 groups mainly staying relatively within the same 1 or 2 percentage points throughout the year. So things to look at. When we shift over to next generation science standards, keep in mind that the science test is given to students in grades 5 and 8, and once at the high school level. Our district chooses to do that during 11th grade because the kids are already in test mode as 11th graders. It would seem to make a logical sense. The science scores are scheduled to be released this year, January 2020. They'll be released. This would be the first year that they actually will have scores of significance for the families and students and for us to actually see as well. These will not be a part of the California dashboard this year. They're just coming out to us. Once the scores are made available, we'll come back with maybe a brief report or a Friday memo to you so you understand what's going on. These will be the first official scores and will count as our baseline results to which next year's scores will be compared. So we're already in the process of prepping those kids to kind of continue to show growth. In the meantime, science teachers and our elementary science specialists continue to implement the NGSS science the standards. And the middle school science teachers are, at least 10 of them, currently piloting 2 new publishers materials for NGS-aligned instructional materials, and we're hoping to have that rolled out in the fall of 2020-21. So that's when we would hope to have that out to all middle schools. Let's talk about AP and IB. our fine acronyms. So advanced placement, here's a summary of our advanced placement tests that we offer to students and the subsequent pass rate for each one. There was an increase of 20 more students who took an AP class this year. And this means that more students could be deemed college and career ready by the state as reflected in that dashboard indicator. Remember, that's one of the ways to prove your college and career readiness on that thing was that you would have taken and passed two AP exams or two IB exams during your course of your high school. In Granada, looking at IB, Granada High School, who has the International Baccalaureate Program, they gave 158 IB exams to IB students, and the pass rate remained strong at 78%. In addition, I went back and kind of looked at this since we've had the IB program now rolling out a couple years. The number of Granada High School students enrolled in the IB diploma program, which is only 11th and 12th graders, that's when you can do that program. Otherwise, you are in the middle years program from 5th grade through 10th grade, and you're in the primary years program when you're in kindergarten up till 4th grade. The number of students in the IB diploma program nearly doubled from last year. That number that's up in the column, it says 550 students enrolled in courses. It was 220 something last year. And so currently that's a great way of proving some progress on that. And GSS is currently in the process of adding the final grades. 9th and 10th grade have not been a part of the IB program for us in the middle years program. We are working on sending teachers now this year to prep them to offer courses in the middle years program for 9th and 10th grade. So they would be able to kind of complete, we'd have a straight flush of K through 12th grade in the IB program for kids, which is kind of exciting. So let's scoot over to the SAT, PSAT. Each year, the Livermore offers the PSAT to all sophomores at no cost. And that is to students thanks to the assistance from the Pedrosi Foundation. It's our hope that by having students be able to take the PSAT, which normally would have an associated cost, but to have them have a chance to take it as a sophomore, that more students would be encouraged by the results to consider pursuing taking the SAT eventually, or the junior year PSAT, and eventually maybe taking that on into a college, whichever way they choose to go for that. We did have 4 national merit semifinalists identified last spring. These are students who were eligible because they took the PSAT as a junior. That's the year that it counts, which would technically be a second time. And as a result of scoring very well, they got recognized as a national merit semifinalist, and then they get to see if they get to move forward into being a finalist and so on. So it's kind of an impressive thing that we keep having students being selected for that. There we go, sorry. I'm pushing down so hard on my slide charts here. All right, here's the one on the English Language Proficiency Assessment, or the LPAC, that we would have. This shows the English proficiency for our students. Students who obtain a level 4, or the top darker green level at the top, would be considered for eligibility in being reclassified or redesignated English Language Proficient, like we saw in the 4. This year we celebrated 151 students who were reclassified. If you notice that we have 18.5% of our English learners scored at the highest level, or well-developed, for their English language development. And on the 4 domains assessed as part of the LPAC, our students demonstrated strengths in the area of speaking and in the areas of reading, which is really good. In addition, separate to this, is just the importance of biliteracy in today's day and age. And so just to point out that we did issue 107 seals of biliteracy to our students who demonstrated proficiency in 2 or more languages, which is really impressive as well. Physical fitness, I kind of came up with an interesting take for this for comparative sake, since now we have a little bit more trending data. Whoa, geez, woo-hoo, where'd I go? I know. It's flying. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it on the edge on the stuff there. So this one is the physical fitness test, and it's given to students again in grades 5, 7, and 9. Research does show that students who are physically or more physically fit have a greater tendency to do better in an academic setting. To pass it, the student has to pass 5 of the 6 test sections. There are multiple ways, by the way, for each section to be able to kind of demonstrate it. It's not just one hard and fast way. If students can demonstrate physical fitness in 9th grade, then the students will not have to continue to take PE classes beyond the high school beyond their sophomore year for a high school graduation requirement of 20 units of PE, essentially. So I did kind of come up with a chart on the bottom where you see the yellow going across diagonally and the blue. So I've kind of been tracking, and I went back and tracked 5th graders in 2014-15 who became 7th graders in 2016-17 who became 9th graders in 2018-19. So you can kind of follow a cohort as they go through. And so you'll see that the 5th grade cohort in 2014-15 increased the percentage of students that passed the physical fitness test by 17% since the time they took it in 5th grade. That same cohort, by the time they took it, when it was meaningful or significant in 9th grade, not that it's not any other time, but that's the time that there's a little more pressure on them because of the PE requirement, had improved by 17% from 58 up to 75. While the 5th grade cohort already in 2016-17, the lighter blue there, has already shown a 7% increase in just the difference between 5th grade and 7th grade. And if you notice, the same kind of trend that the now 5th graders going across the line actually improved from 58 as a starting point to 61 to a starting point to 62 as a starting point. So we're kind of picking up momentum on that. And then, in addition, if you look at the top chart, the majority of our schools did show improvement or remained constant as compared to last year, and the top shows all green. So all of the grade 5, grade 7, and grade 9 schools each showed a improvement in the number of percentage of students that were 5 of 6 or 6 of 6 over last year. And then this year, we would expect to see some additional improvement in 5th grade as a direct result of hiring a part-time teacher on special assignment who is working explicitly with our elementary teachers on fitness and physical education practices to kind of prep our kids even better. So just a heads up, because this will be coming to you soon, coming to you live on Thursday. The California dashboard for 2019 will be available to the public beginning on Thursday, December 12th. What you're looking at here in your computer monitors is last year's, so don't get excited. This is last year's, so we didn't want to share it out yet. Because it's not public consumption yet. The dashboard, just as a reminder, uses multiple metrics to show a complete picture of student achievement. And when we do have the dashboard results and they're live, we will obviously give you additional information of how things went. Suffice it to say, yay. So you can see some of the indicators. We do English and math, college career indicator, graduation rate, English learner performance indicator, which actually will not have a dial, because it's the first year of a new way of assessing and using the information differently. So it will only have a basically 6 different level kind of thing, and how kids are improving from one year to the next, which will be good. And then chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, and then the local measures that I know Mr. Biondi had presented to you in a previous one, the 5 that were selected. Areas of concentrated focus for us. So math is one of our board's priorities this year. A draft mathematics teaching and learning plan was developed this summer and has begun to be implemented with a focus on the best instructional practices for our kids. In addition, an algebra task force has been created to help increase first-time pass rates in Algebra 1. Hopefully this effect will actually trigger an increase in the number of students who then have the confidence, perseverance, and what have you to go on to complete geometry and Algebra 2 classes, which if you kind of go and extrapolate, when we look at the 11th grade SBAC testing for math, it's generally trying to assess content in algebra, geometry, and Algebra 2. So it would kind of obviously mean the more students you would have in completing up through an Algebra 2, the greater the likelihood of having a positive outcome on their SBAC assessment if they've mastered everything as they've gone from each grade level. We also will, if you're looking, create and offer an intensive English learner summer school program this year. We're going to do something very different, and we're going to be targeting just our level 1 and level 2 students identified on the LPAC and trying to offer a very intensive program in the summer for them. We continue to provide our students opportunities to prepare for the SBAC using the interim assessment block tests for language arts and math, and we do 2 math and 2 English all through the year. And this year we are encouraging our teachers to administer them, and they would give, and the learning that through the problems, walking through the questions and allowing them, maybe the first pass, they all work on it separately. Then maybe it's a share with a partner, what strategies, how did you get there, what did you see? And the teacher's listening to all this, picking up on the thinking and the dialogue that's going on. And then maybe the teacher kind of talks about, let's share out some of the best ways that people tackled these questions or these performance tests. And so we've done that and throughout, which is kind of a nice way. Same is true with English language arts. So if there's a writing thing, we could pop up, what did you see out there, that someone could put up their example right up on the screen. Here's such and such as a response. How would you guys see this? As a 1, a 2? What would you score it on a rubric? And so that the kids can kind of see examples, and the teachers seeing that live too. So it's a little different approach that we expanded on this year a bit.
We also had really incredible feedback about that from the Faculty Communication Council when Assistant Superintendent Biondi and I were at that. The teachers were saying how it was designed originally to help students process and learn together, and also reduce some of the apprehension and test anxiety, because they would have more familiarity. But actually the teachers were saying that it really was a teachable moment for them, and they learned different things. One example, I remember one of the teachers saying that as the students were processing, these were kids who were pretty capable with math, but they were stuck, and she realized that they didn't really know the word that was being used was infer. And they were all interpreting what that meant differently and coming up with a different idea. And so it was a higher level critical thinking, but it was really a vocabulary word that they were getting stuck with a lot of students, some English learners, but some not. And so that helped them understand that it isn't enough to teach just the math piece. They need to work on the language piece that's related to math. So that was just one example, if I can interject there.
Please, thank you. All right, so then I also created some additional systemic next steps. And so up here are MTSS TOSAs, our multi-tiered systems of support, have been training our elementary sites and middle school sites, but they're actually right now training our elementary sites to use a universal screening tool called CBM in the areas of English language arts and math. This tool will actually help to identify struggling students earlier on. We'll try to give it right out on the bat. We'll be able to identify the kids and see what then other services or programs can we provide for them. And then the other was, in addition, we've also begun to provide Tier 1 and Tier 2 remedial support through programs like 95% and Sunday. For English language arts, and we're exploring something similar with mathematics and piloting some programs like ST Math and Dreambox for mathematics as additional support opportunities for people that we already know identified through this universal screening tool. Right up front, we need to kind of jump on how can we support them in addition to what they're getting in the classroom. What next could we do for Tier 2 and Tier 3? And if you notice on the systemic next steps, I actually attached our LCAP action items that were attached to it. So implementing the universal screening tool was one of the Goal 1 action items in there, and the implementation of the framework for success as we continue to march that forward was actually found in both the LCAP and Goal 1 and in Goal 2. And then, well, that would conclude my assessment report. So there you go.
Okay. We'll start with Mrs. White.
Dr. Greer, I noticed that in the math performance, it seemed to decrease between 17-18 and 18-19. Did the test change, or the instructional materials change, or what happened? Because 3 of the 4 subgroups that you talked about decreased there between the yellow went down to blue.
Up and inside here. Again, when the English learners and reclassified fluent English proficient, one of the things to keep in mind is we redesignate more students into reclassified fluent English proficient. There's fewer student English people, academic English learners into the reclassified category. But no, the test didn't change in a difference in that way.
It says here the white, the Asians, and the African Americans all went down.
Correct. 1% each throughout. Yeah. African Americans significant, but again, there was a smaller sample size.
The Hispanic held their own, but
They did.
so it just a fluke.
We'll see how it trends through forward going on, but yes, because they were all kind of marching on their way up the stairs. So it would be interesting to kind of look. Yeah, just a little,
Okay.
but not by very much. I mean, just
Still is disappointing that only, 6 of 10 of our students are proficient.
on average, yes. When we look
On
at it
average,
as a half,
you know,
average.
some subgroups are
yes.
different, but that's still not, it's disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. Move to Mr. Wenzel.
Yeah, when I look at statistics and you're setting a goal, we're going to improve. And I don't know how I can word this. I mean, there are certain teachers better than others, and there are certain processes that are better and the kids are getting it and learning. How do we evaluate, what's the oversight that when you look at certain statistics and you search certain classes, and you'll see one class that the kids are doing really well, and then other classes are not doing so well, how do we, or maybe we can't do it, we rely too much on the teacher to get this done? Is there oversight or supervision to look at this and provide that help halfway through the year? And, you know, see, okay, I've noticed that there's a dip in your scores, and then come in versus waiting till it's all over and then hearing, you know, this is the score.
So those conversations happen at the site level. What we do at the district level is provide high quality instructional materials and high quality professional development. So we really want to have the best tools in our teachers' hands and support them with the best strategies. And then that level of data analysis happens at the site level, and we have professional learning communities. So teachers do share data with each other, and they talk about the success and challenges that they have. And ultimately, we try to replicate the best practices and the best results in all of our classrooms.
But on the subject also of evaluation and support, so we also have math teaching coaches who come directly into the classroom, and we've increased that thanks to our board support because math is an area of focus. And so one of their main focus areas is to go in and support teachers. And in the beginning, it was teachers who volunteered, and now actually they are increasingly making themselves available, whether even if a teacher is a little nervous about having someone else in their classroom. So they're going in and pushing into the classrooms. And then our Unite team, which is, they're really adept at technology. They're also helping teachers learn how to use technology in order to increase access and engagement of students in the curriculum in different ways. And math is one of their areas of focus. But Mr. Biani, could you also share, there was a new, as part of our math teaching and learning plan, there's a new evaluation card that was, or observation card, actually, not evaluation, I'm sorry, observation card that we have trained with and worked with our principals on.
Yes, in order for our principals to kind of evaluate instruction in the classrooms, there is a 5x8 card that was developed by SERP and San Francisco and Oakland Unified School Districts, which was in the addendum of the math teaching and learning plan. And we have trained our principals on the use of that. And as we, as cabinet members, visit school sites, we're very interested in seeing math instruction and looking at those kind of proven practices that we for that.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. Move to Mrs. Prusso.
One thing that I noticed over and over again as I was looking through this is the high achievement of the reclassified learners. How do you account for that, or how can we replicate that all the way across, or how do you account for that? I know there's probably a theory.
The standards that the state and our district establish for reclassification are very, very high. So in order to achieve that, a student has to be successful not only in learning English, but also academically successful. And so that, I think, accounts for it, is that the student has to be
they're motivated.
very high achieving
Okay.
in all areas. And I think that also gives an inverse impact on the English learners, because you take your highest achieving English learners and you move them to a different student group. And so that, by its nature, will lower the performance of your English learners, because you're removing students, the highest performing students in that group, to another student group.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense now. Then you kind of answered this question, but I just want to sort of highlight it because looking at our 11th grade scores, especially in math, and watching them drop, and my question had been to you, but I think you answered it, is what math skills were required on the 11th grade CASP, and it is more than just algebra. So geometry and algebra 2 are included. So if we have 11th graders who haven't reached that level, that's obviously going to affect the scores. So we benefit in trying to push those kids through.
Yes, so definitely, that test does measure our students' performance on geometry and algebra 2 as well. Dr. Greer did mention, and this goes to Mr. Wenzel's question, the algebra task force as well is really analyzing our algebra instruction and ensuring that course, which really has a huge impact on future mathematical achievement, is having a positive impact on student achievement. There's also a motivation issue in 11th grade because this is one of many tests that 11th grade students take. And there are other tests that have a more tangible impact on college and their futures. And this one doesn't impact their grade. It doesn't impact their college admissions. And we are working with our high schools to try to motivate students to take this as seriously as they take the other assessments that they take during this season of testing that they go through. And that's a challenge that we're working with our schools to address.
And it's the state that sets the grades that you take these tests. So we couldn't change it to 10th grade and see if that helped. Of course, 10th grade would even give them less time, I guess, to get through to algebra 2.
That is correct. And the state is considering other alternatives other than this test for that grade level, but they haven't made any decisions yet.
Okay, and then this is sort of related, but not really to your presentation, but I just wanted to say we did get an update on the math in the Friday memo, and I appreciated the updates. As many people may know or have understood or heard from this today, that we as a board really want math to be a priority for our district. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years, and we're hoping to see those scores come up. And then I also just wanted really quickly to thank the Pedrosi Foundation for taking on the PSAT for our sophomores. I think that's, like you said, I think that's a really great service for them, and I think it gets the students prepared and possibly thinking more about college and preparing them for the SAT and the ACT. So anyway, thank you for putting this together. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Prusso. Move to Mr. Rogie.
Before I go on with my comments, I'd like to get some impressions from our high school reps about math in general.
In general?
I'm looking for more specific, but I don't want to trap you either. So what do you think that we can do to improve math, or do you think it's fine?
I don't know if it's like still continuing in like the elementary schools, but when I went through elementary school, we had the accelerated math program, which was similar to AR. So that was kind of like a standardized testing that you would just kind of take on your own pace, and you just take the test. And as you take the test, it like your teachers reward you just how like your AR is, like how you go get a medal. I'm not sure if that's still continuing because I know the years below it kind of stopped. So I don't know if they still continue that in elementary school, but that was just like a huge incentive to kind of like, I don't know, when you're younger and you get like a prize for doing something, you feel like you strive to do more. So maybe that's like what sparked our interest in math. And then going up through 8th grade, we were the last class that took Algebra 2 as 8th graders, and then it dropped back down to geometry. So I would just, I don't know, I felt like our class was just kind of already on the accelerated pathway, so a lot of the seniors or at least on Livermore's behalf, that I know a lot of us are already almost done with all the math that you needed to be done by sophomore year. And if needed, you could continue through junior or senior year. So I guess like starting young would be like the best incentive to just kind of continue the math progression throughout their high school year as well and just kind of maintain it.
What elementary and middle schools did you go to?
I went to Croce and then Christensen.
Thank you.
So I didn't start taking math in this district until the 8th grade, so I can really only comment on like my high school experience in math. What I can say is that the 2 trimester math classes, which are optional because there's a 3 trimester option, are extremely fast-paced classes. And even though there is a 3 trimester option, there's a lot, there's a lot that goes into that. There's these class schedules, like, there are, if you want to fit in certain classes and you want to build your transcript, there's a lot of times where it's not that we're forced into it, but we're nearly forced into taking a 2 trimester math class, which is extremely fast. It was fast for me, even though math has always been one of my strongest subjects. One thing that helped me that I had access to was a tutor, but that's not something that somebody would have access to if they came from like a low socioeconomic background. So if we could find a way to make, like, I know like at the college level, there's like office hours, so something like that. And we do have the ACE implemented, but that's only 1 day a week. And 30 minutes 1 day a week is not enough for something like math. So those are the only, that's my only input on that.
Thank you. Rod, did you have any input or any tutoring or anything?
I didn't go through any tutoring, but through my middle school years, we had math counts. So that was just like the only thing. And our teacher just gave us extra credit by going to it. So it was just kind of like a way to motivate most of us kids to try and get ourselves into it. But like she said, in high school as well, when I took the 2 trimester, I fell back, and I've never, not never, but I usually, like she said, math was one of my stronger points. So the 2 trimester, if you think about it, it's August through late February, March, and then, you're kind of done with math until the next starting August. So that's a huge break for math in general in between, and especially in high school when it's such hard courses that you're taking, or it's a jump from pre-calculus to calculus and you want to do AP. You're not having a continuous stimulation in math. It's a break in between, so you tend to fall back. And then when you even take the new course, even though it's a continuation, it's starting from scratch again. So I always found it hard having the 2 trimesters, so I just took a regular course until my junior and senior year when I took on the AP classes.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that our trend lines are moving, but it's just disheartening to me to see that math by grade level, basically it's 54%. The trend. I need some tabs here. The trend, mathematics trend, is also disappointing to me. I'm looking at 2016 for grade level 3 to 2019. They started at 62 and they ended at 47%. Same thing with 2017, 60%. They dropped to 55 and then to 59. I'm sure there's reasoning behind it. I just don't know what it is. And I know you're all working on it. I just have a hard time with the numbers being so low. I don't know what other districts are. I haven't looked at them, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogi. Just a couple things I'm looking at just in terms of trends. I know we're working on the math. I know it's a programmatic change, and I appreciate that. Something that I notice is, and I think Mrs. Prusso brought it up, was we look at the reclassified fluent English proficiency and their rise. But one thing on the overall demographics, when you pointed that out at the beginning of the presentation, was we have a high percentage, about 31% of Hispanics that seem to be particularly challenged in some of the areas. And I know that our focus is on math, and I'm sure you're looking at it. I'm just looking at for a point of in English, because if you look at the reclassified students and their success, it's the proficiency in language that carries over into proficiency in all other subjects. Math, in this case, our most challenged group, is also challenged in language proficiency. And I don't know if that's true, or if I'm just trying to derive that from stats that I'm looking at.
No, I absolutely agree. Math in the new standards is very language rich and vocabulary rich, and so it's not enough just to look at the numbers anymore. You really need to have a strong language foundation in order to be successful with the current math that we're teaching and the students are being assessed on.
And it kind of goes more to the critical thinking as opposed to memorization. And
Well, and to that point, there's two different versions. There's the performance task, and there's also the computational part of the testing. That gets less than the performance task. The performance task is weighted a little higher, and it requires you to have more thorough explanation, and you have to be able to understand and read and interpret in English the math problem, the scenario they're giving you, and then turn around and kind of walk someone through your thinking on paper with, more than just a bunch of computations, but an explanation and how you see things. So that makes it a challenge in general for everyone, but in particular for people trying to learn the English language and having to apply it into a question like that. And that's weighted heavier than the computational part of the assessment. So.
Okay. And you mentioned, Dr. Greer, about the physical fitness and the kids, as there's kind of a correlation between the performance and increases, or the proficiency in physical fitness as it relates to the academic side. And I'm wondering, because if you look at in our English language arts, over the 5-year period, there's a 7% drop for our 11th graders, and then on math, we're down 5% over 5. What I'm wondering is if, because there's an option for physical fitness, because you're proficient, it appears as though it's at the same spot. At the point at which physical fitness becomes optional, the following year in 11th grade, your academic scores are down. I'm just wondering if there's a correlation to the lack of physical fitness. I mean, it would stand to reason that if physical fitness increase your academic scores, that the absence of physical fitness, or the option not to take it, may correlate in conjunction with maybe being a little apathetic because you're in 11th grade or something. But I don't know if it's just something to look at.
It would be an interesting research study to kind of see, because I'm sure some of those students that aren't taking PE are continuing to do a sport, so they're probably still being physically fit, or they're having their outside activities, their clubs and their other gymnasts and things like that. They're also doing it that aren't kind of in the mix or numbers here, but it would be an interesting study.
Okay. Any further questions? Riley?
I mean, the nature of when these tests are, I would say, has a profound impact on the results, because during this time for me, I was taking IB exams, SATs, ACTs, and the truth is my focus was on those because, like you mentioned, they have a more direct impact on my immediate future. So I know just from common conversations that many people told me, oh, I'm not going to try on this. This doesn't affect my grade. So these are some of the most high achieving students. I'm in the
Right.
IB diploma program saying these things simply because they're tired, And so I don't know. I think that is a statewide thing, but the nature of when they are taken, I would say, has probably impacted the scores, especially for something like math. That's higher order thinking, and if you're tired, that's not something that you're going to perform very well on. And then again, just going back to what we had mentioned about trimesters, if students had come into this test having a gap in their, in their mathematics, that could have also had an impact, because sometimes with math, it's as simple as recalling a formula that how to do it, but maybe you forgot that one formula or something like
Right.
that.
Thank you. Rada?
As far as like the physical rigor of things, as a junior and senior, I don't know, I did, but a lot of kids that I know of within just like my whole leadership and students in general, a lot of kids either take like the human performance class, which isn't like classified as like PE as general, it's like an elective course, or like kids who are in baseball or football or even other sports, they take like a spring season or whatever for their 5th period during their school day to go practice more, or like if it's a baseball player, he goes batting extra with like the coach or whoever it is. So I think like the physical aspect of it, kids do take time to do that, but like she said, it's just 11th grade is just like a really hard year when you have everything going on and it all just kind of gets piled up at the same time. Or even if it's like in March, which they've done in past, it's also the time when the trimester is ending. So you're either focusing on finals or one way or another. It's just like a hard like that, like last few months of the school year.
Thanks, appreciate your perspective. Mr. Spruso.
I just wanted to say that I think that Mike and Kevin are probably really happy that you guys were here because you've confirmed what they're always telling me about the high stakes in the 11th grade and listening to you, and I always never believed them, but listening to you, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're going to give them some money afterwards. I've said this before in other meetings, but I'll just say it again. I think it would be, if there are other ways that we can assess how we're doing besides looking at the CASP results, especially for 11th grade, to sort of get an idea of where are we. We've talked about looking at like SAT and ACT scores, although I know not everyone takes those, but maybe other ways that we can assess whether it's grades or, I don't know. That might be the best way because you don't want to throw another test at them, another assessment. But
Let's throw an 8th
let's throw another
test.
test. Yeah, but maybe there's another way that maybe we can report out to us or even to the public on how we're doing specifically in 11th grade using other assessments besides the CASP, because it does sound like the data is probably a little bit skewed in that case. From what you guys have said continually, what they finally convinced me is probably true. So,
And a few years back when we had the former test, our students became very adept at testing with that test, and our teachers preparing students, and it was not as higher level of critical thinking. It also wasn't as language rich and intensive. But at that, another thing that we did do, and I think Mr. Van Schack was the principal then, and probably Mrs. Rambo at some point, we actually did assess with the kids that they were not motivated, and at least in the math, we ended up putting that, the opportunity to increase your grade in your classroom, in your math class, based on how you performed on the test. And I know some districts, because of the very same reason, have put it on the transcript. And as soon as it became something on the transcript, there was a higher stake embedded in it. So those are things that we don't just have to have a given, but since you brought that up, if it were on your transcript or if it could increase, it wasn't an entire grade. I think it was
I don't want to be responsible for that.
I don't know. I'm
If
just saying, but
someone
we did do this. But we did do it, and I know other districts that have, and sometimes our scores are unfavorably compared to some of those districts. So there is that option that some have chosen, which increases the stakes for children and then also increases their overall test scores. But I think the other thing, when I look at our assessment report, clearly we have room to grow. Clearly we have people who would like us to be in a different area, but I also want to remind you what I see as I look at the demographics, and I also think of what I know about math, which is averages. And so if we have two students and one does poorly and one does high, the average comes out at 50 or 60%, and that doesn't really tell the story because we have extremely high achieving students who are doing exceptionally well, and in their demographic, comparatively, are better than most of our counterparts. We have fewer of those students. And what I'm saying is I'm not accepting an achievement gap, but I am calling mind to it. Because when we have students, sometimes people tend to compare us with a district that is just close in geographic proximity. But those districts actually don't have 33% poverty. They don't have parent education levels that some of us have. Now, people say, oh, we're at the labs and we have PhDs and all of that, but we also have one of the lowest parent education levels for some of our significant schools and classes. And I don't accept that as an excuse because my own mom only went to 8th grade. And I know it's possible to do better, but I also know it was exceptional to get beyond that in one generation. It wasn't the norm. And so that's where our focus is on pushing and increasing the level of achievement. But it's also on understanding that if you're doing a comparison, we used to have something called a similar school ranking, which actually really told the story because it said, look at your district compared to similar like districts with your demographic, which is what we started at. So that's one of the things that happens with an average. That's why I look at median and I look at range. Mm-hmm. And because that's actually a better representation, because when you just average everyone together, it's not the true story. It's one piece of it. And so that's how we look at it and say, that's why we are focusing and breaking it down. And I think Dr. Greer did an excellent job of showing us our demographics, and then we can really get to our challenges. And then ultimately, it's about the individual student. You know, an individual child is more than their data point and their demographic, but unfortunately, we're mirroring a larger trend, which is there is an achievement gap, and we're still struggling with English learners and children in poverty from being on par with their peers. And that has many factors that go far beyond the school. That starts with prenatal care, and it has to do with health, and it has to do with attendance, which we're also tackling. It has to do with a lot of things. So we are now becoming that for everyone. And we also, in the era of overstressing your children out about a test, we also don't want to have children who are having mental breakdowns because of the stress of all the testing. So we're trying to say, yes, the test is important, do your best. What's more important than the test is that they actually know their stuff and that they're good people. And I would hang our kids' hats on that every time, because I hear our speeches at graduation, and they're not just talking about, I have the highest test scores. I hire people all the time. I'm not looking at their transcripts. I don't know what any of your test scores are, but I respect you as adults because you're successful and you are giving to your community, and you are knowledgeable enough to be able to succeed in life. And so that's part of our overall mission. And so I do value tests, but I also know I love tests. I live for tests. I ace tests. I was like, give me more tests. The same adrenaline. No, seriously. But did that make me a better person? No, I was a great test taker, but I wasn't a good swimmer. If all of this was about swimming, then Mr. Biondi and Ms. Prusso would be getting, because you had that, and I would be feeling like a failure, even though I'm not a failure. I just not a great swimmer, but I'm good at something else. And so what happens is I always just caution people to say this is a measure. It's an important one. It's one some people at the state have decided this day is very important. But I would never judge all of our children by how they perform on one test on one given day, knowing the many things that I know about what our children are facing. So we are judged on that, and so that's why we go through all of this, and we want every child to perform. But, I look at things like a driving test. Some people took 5 times to pass it. It doesn't matter. Eventually, they all drive. Some people take 7 years to go to college. Some finish in 4. However you get there, when you get there, you get the degree. So I still don't want our children to feel like they are failing or less than our counterparts because they didn't quite get 1 answer on a test or 5 answers. Because our children, if you listen to them, they're giving the community, they're wonderful people, and they are knocking the socks off as alumni places, and people want to hire them. So that's just my thing, and I know people are counting the minutes and time and all that, but it concerns me that so much overemphasis is being stressing out our children about tests. I have kids emailing me at 2 a.m. worried about a test and not wanting to get up the next day. And we don't want to become that district. So I don't want to lead that kind of a district. So we are going to get better in math. You're going to see these scores up. You're not going to be so disappointed that you can't face your public, because we always do better and we will continue to improve. But I also want to tell you our kids are really smart and they have many ways of showing it, and I would love to share other ways with Mrs. Prusso too. And I think we need to get better at showcasing all that they know, because they really are incredible children. And you see 2 of them here. So, and actually 1 here earlier, or quite a few here earlier. So anyway, thank you. Sorry.
Not at all. Thank you. Good perspective. Good discussion. Any other comments about this section? Mr. Wenzel?
So it's interesting. Thank you for providing this information and part of transparency. I'm getting a lot of information from parents, teachers, and students, and it's starting to come more. And then you start adding stresses of going to school about trimesters. And I was glad you said that, because I'm hearing it. My son tells me, I talked to his friends, I talked to my daughter that's graduated 2 years ago, and then talking to teachers. I don't know if there's a correlation. I don't want to throw a wrench into our whole system, but I think now that we have seen an increase with the stresses and mental health, that we may want to reevaluate what we're putting on our kids in a trimester system. And is there a correlation on this? Because so much, to your point, is exactly what I've heard for so many students. So much is put on us in a short period of time, and I've got all this going on. And it does prepare you for life. There's a lot of success stories, and it's a good thing. But are we leaving people behind? Are we causing this additional stress? And I don't know how we can study this compared to other schools that are on the semester system with the same type of makeup that we have in our demographic here. I mean, that's always what I look for is the apples to apples. It's hard to look at the San Ramon Valley School District versus Livermore because of what is over there. But it's interesting to me that I'm hearing that more and more about this trimester system. And it's not just the student. Sometimes you take that with a grain of salt, but more parents are saying it. My kids are coming out stressed, and it's, this is what I notice. And now I'm hearing it from teachers. So it's like, okay, what is the answer here? Is it something that we still keep pushing through, and how do we make it better for our students to succeed? Or are we putting that much pressure on them and causing these issues of success? This the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. Any further discussion, comments? Nice and robust tonight. All right, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. We're going to move into our discussion action items. And if you'd introduce our first item, 12.1, please.
Certainly. So for our next portion, and I think at least we may have one representative, or at least we do for the next item, we'll be asking Mrs. Susan Kinder to go through the consideration for our board members for appointment to our oversight committee for Measure G parcel tax. We came a couple weeks ago and said we are still looking for candidates, and now we have some high quality candidates for you.
Thank you. Good evening, President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers. So tonight we have some candidates to bring forward. So just some facts about Measure G. We want to get it up on the screen. In November 2014, our Livermore community passed the parcel tax, which is known as Measure G. Annually, the measure requires an independent citizens oversight committee to annually report and review on expenditures. The eligibility to be on the committee is that they must live within the boundaries of the district, and the term is a 2-year term. Oops, I went too far. So the goals of Measure G funding are to attract and retain quality teachers, provide advanced courses in math, science, and engineering, keep schools well-maintained, provide elementary school science and technology specialists, keep classroom technology and instructional materials up to date, and to the extent that funds are available, to maintain academic programs, including the purchase of instructional equipment, materials, and supplies. And this measure started on July 1st, 2015, and expires on June 30th, 2022. So the committee's charge is to conduct meetings in accordance with the Brown Act, which means all the meetings are open to the public. They review the amount received and expended within the specific budget year, and then they must present a report to you by the final meeting of the school year. So typically they do it either at the end of May or beginning of June. So our current members are Robert DeLiso, Nicole Sardella, and David Strubing. And then the members that we hope that you'll appoint tonight is a familiar one, Brian Balaz, who was on the committee before. He's reapplied. And Annette Sachs, who is a parent in our community. And the superintendent's recommendation is to appoint the members as designated to the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure G, parcel tax.
Any comments? I would entertain a motion if there's no more discussion.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the new members on the Citizen Oversight Committee as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roque. It's been seconded by Mr. Wenzel. Any discussion on the motion? I would just like to add that to put a comment on the nominations. I appreciate the people from the public coming through and taking on the commitment and that level of dedication that it takes to be on that committee and to give us the fiscal oversight, because I think that's imperative to the whole overall public sentiment in terms of having faith in the district to expend the funds successfully, and we've had great success with it, and I think that it is fundamental to that success has been this Citizens Oversight Committee, whether it's on the first, second, or this third rendition of the parcel tax. So thank you very much. Any further discussion? I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Yes, myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Introduce the second item.
Certainly moving right along, we will ask Mr. Mike Biondi, our Assistant Superintendent, to introduce your appointment for Local Control Accountability Plan Advisory Committee members. And I know we have maybe 2 here tonight, which is very exciting, and they stuck it out. I'm sure they were told it might be only a half an hour, and we've extended that, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. So we may have 3, I think, Mrs. Thompson.
So thank you. Good evening, Board President Bueno, members of the board, Superintendent Bowers, and Cabinet. Yes, tonight I bring you consideration for appointment of our Local Control Accountability Plan, or LCAP, advisory committees. As you recall, the Local Control Funding Formula seeks transparency, involvement, and accountability through the Local Control Accountability Plan, and this is really the involvement part of that. So we have 2 board-established LCAP advisory committees. The first is the LCAP Advisory Committee. The majority are parents, and we must have representation of parents of English learners, foster youth, and socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And we have on our committee a parent representative from each school. We have students from the high schools, and we also have our employee associations represented. The second advisory committee we work with is our English Learner LCAP Advisory Committee. Again, they're parents and students, and in this case, they're parents of English learners. And it's called the DLAC is the committee, which we meet with, and as I mentioned, we also have students as a part of this committee, and we, as we have experienced tonight, it's really great to have the student voice as part of these committees. So I'll begin with the list of LCAP Advisory Committee members, and as Dr. Bowers mentioned, we have 2 here tonight, and I already am impressed by their commitment by staying this late to be a part of this. We have Tony Carroll and Don Wantroba, and at the end I'm going to ask you, if they approve you, the committees, I'll ask you to come up and shake hands with the board. Here are the names of the LCAP English Learner Advisory Committee and the schools and associations that they represent. And just going back, so for the LCAP Advisory Committee, my partner Susan Kinder, Assistant Superintendent, and I facilitate these meetings. And the LCAP English Learner Advisory Committee, the facilitators are Marnie Angelo, Veronica Ferreira Maya, and myself. The process is one where we begin, and we already have begun, reviewing the current year's LCAP. We do that every Tuesday after Cabinet with a team that comes together on a weekly basis. The next step for us is to engage our stakeholders, and we do that through the committee meetings. We meet with our associations, all our different stakeholder groups, and we do a survey. And then we begin drafting the plan. We open that plan and share that with our public and invite their comments and questions, which we respond to. And then we will have a public hearing, and finally we'll ask in June for the governing board to approve the plan. I wanted to mention that this year there will be a new look to the LCAP. And so we've finished a cycle of LCAP, and we're beginning a new cycle. The State Board of Education is anticipated to approve the new template, which they have promised will be a more streamlined version of the LCAP. And we hope that that happens prior to our need to approve the LCAP, but they have delayed their decision on this. And so we did anticipate it at their December meeting, and then we heard it was going to be at their January meeting, and now we hear it may be as late as March. But no matter when the state approves the template, we will continue to work on the plan because we have ideas of what it may look like. Just there's a option A, option B, and an unknown option at this point. But we will continue to work on the plan and prepare for that final approval of the template. But it will have a new look and a much more streamlined and focused look this year. So the superintendent's recommendation is to appoint the local control accountability plan advisory committees.
Thank you very much. Mrs. White.
You know that I will probably vote no on this. I continue to feel very strongly that we need to have community members on the LCAP committee, folks who are not in any way connected with the dealings of the district, that they don't have students in the district, they're not employed by the district, so that they can speak their mind without concern about repercussions. I did ask at the county if they kept any records about how many districts have community members on the LCAP, and it's not very many, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't. I still think it's a valuable thing, and less than until we include community members on the LCAP, I will continue to vote no.
Can I,
Thank you.
you done?
Mrs. Prusso.
To that point, I have been thinking about this. I know you talked about it last year. And then maybe I could direct a question to Mr. Biondi about this. So my question is, I haven't been to an LCAP meeting, but my understanding is that it is a public meeting. So could a community member, even if they weren't on the advisory committee, attend and participate?
Yes, we do welcome anyone. It is a public meeting in accordance with the Brown Act, and we do have a place on our agenda for public comment on every meeting. And that, in addition, it is an open meeting, so we welcome the input from community members, parents, anyone who has an interest in our schools. And so, yes, anyone is welcome to participate in
On
this
the other
process.
hand, that's different from being a voting member, being able to comment.
Okay.
Yes, it is an advisory committee, so they don't necessarily vote.
There a vote?
Um,
No vote. It's just an advisory committee.
The committee provides very valuable input that informs the writing of the plan.
So theoretically, anyone who comes to the meeting who has information that might be helpful for the plan could be taken into advice. There's no vote within the committee on certain, are we the only vote on the plan?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Prusso. I particularly like the way that it's set up. I appreciate all the involvement. And it's a commitment from a lot of people in the community. I mean, I look at just the LCAP Advisory Committee. It's a good mix. I mean, we have teachers, we have representatives, one's in the room that comes in from the LEA. So we've got our employee associations, we have our teachers, we have community members, parents. I think it's a good mix. And I think that the plans that they've come back with, I've been satisfied with 5 years on this board. And it's a big commitment. So I don't want to put any note that somehow we're looking at this as though it's inadequate. I think it's very adequate. It's met the need, and you brought back really good stuff, and it's a big commitment. And so I think it's important that the people who are participating, because it is quite a bit of it's work, that those people are connected to our schools, whether it be through their association, through their employment, through their children, and I think they do a good job. So I for one, really appreciate it. I appreciate the work bringing this back. This is a big, comprehensive program. So thank you very much. Mr. Rogie.
So what is standing in the way of having community members? Is it just procedure, policy?
The board would, if the board directed me to include community members, then I would do that.
Is there any negatives to that?
It's really a practice that different districts approach, based on the feedback and the board direction. So it's really up to each district. The requirement is that you do have authentic engagement with your community,
right,
and you have local decision-making on how you do that. But there's requirements on who must be a part of the committee, such as representatives for foster youth, English learners, and socioeconomically disadvantaged students.
Is there a number of people that can be on the committee? Is it locked?
Pardon me? I didn't.
Is there a lock on how many can be on that advisory?
No, there is not a limit on the number of people who can be on the committee.
and this has been brought up before, and so I think when we first started the committees, so we did ask for the counties and the one thing, advice, and they did also more recently, Trustee White reached out to see, so some districts do, so it's not as simple as saying, yes, include them, because then there would be, it's not that we couldn't, if it was the board's desire, the majority of the board's desire, we would then we have to come up with a process for how they're selected, because and so then it has to be an application process, which we have in place for parcel tax, and we have in place for Measure, you can see those are required by law, that we have Measure J, and that we have people, and so from the standpoint in the past, it's been, those are key committees, and so we have a lot of community members who are on PCIC, we have a lot of members on the Education Foundation, we have board members, so and then we have now a partial tax and an oversight for Measure J bond. And so a lot of the same community members were just scrambling to keep those sometimes because it's a big commitment. But there's no directive that says we couldn't. It's just that if we did receive direction, then we would have to come up with a process, and the board would have to approve that because you appoint the committees.
Yeah, I mean, it's an idea, to question how we're doing it. But my opinion is based on the folks that have come in when we've done the report, that have been on the committee, how they thought it was a good process. We've had positive input from the mandated groups that have representation, and I like the way it is. And if something's working and it's fine, we haven't had any community output that is, or input that has come and said, please alter the way you do your LCAP. It seems like it's been very satisfactory. And so I know we have the concern annually. I like the way it is, so.
I'm going to vote yes on it this time, but I would sure like to see us have a more in-depth discussion about it in the future, so that this isn't done every year when it comes down to this. So we've got some solid information and policy and processes in it. So thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation.
Mr. President, I move that we appoint the Local Control Accountability Plan Advisory Committees.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Prusso. It's been seconded by Mr. Wenzel to accept the superintendent's recommendation to appoint the Local Control Accountability Plan Advisory Committees. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Nay.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. That motion carries 4-1.
Okay, and if I may ask the committee members who have lasted this far in the meeting to come on up and shake hands. And I neglected
Thank you.
to
They should get a
include
medal
someone who
for
loves
staying so
attention.
long.
Amy Thompson is also here and on the committee.
Have a cookie.
Thank you for serving.
Good work. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a cold.
Good to see you.
Staying away.
Thank you for staying. I've got a cold. Thank you.
Thank you.
We could introduce our next item.
Certainly, I will
12-3,
ask
please.
Mrs. Susan Kinder, our Assistant Superintendent, to introduce actually the next two items, which have to do with our audits. Very important information and actually good news.
Yes, so good evening again. I'd like to invite Jeff Nigro up. He's the partner from Nigro & Nigro who conducts our audits, and we're very happy to have another audit under our belt. And I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, great. All right. Well, yes, we're going to take a little trip back in time to the 2018-19 school year. And what you have in front of you, we're actually going to talk about two audits, but first we're going to talk about the district's annual audit, the one that's required by Education Code, and really just start off by talking about what the audit is. I know a lot of people hear the word audit, and it conjures up negative images of men in black suits kicking down doors. carting people away in handcuffs. And there are certainly audits like that, but the annual district audit's nothing like that, I assure you. We don't carry the handcuffs with us. So really what the objective of it is for us to come in and give an independent evaluation of the district's operations and an opinion on the district's financial statements and whether they're in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. So it's really not that glamorous, but it's, when you adopt those unaudited actuals in September, basically we're coming in and saying, yeah, those numbers are reliable, okay? So in our audit report on page 1, we're giving what's called a clean or an unmodified opinion, basically that the financials do comply with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's the first kudos, because that's not just taken for granted every year. That there's a lot of accounting knowledge and stuff that has to go into that. So that's a good achievement. Just to walk you through the rest of the report real briefly, it's a lengthy report, but just point out some of the highlights here, like the MD&A section, which is pages 3 through 10. I always say that if you're not a numbers person, that section of the report is the only section you really need to look at, because it's a sort of an executive summary of what's contained in the audit. Gives a lot of comparative information about the district and finances year over year. Some of the other sections of the report, the government-wide financial statements are there to give you a big picture view of the district. Those financials include things like capital assets the district owns, buildings and land, but it also shows all of the debt the district has, such as general obligation bonds and some other liabilities that GASB requires you to book. So they're sort of there to give a big picture view. The fund financial statements are really where you live day to day. Those are the more current look at the financials, really looking at your general fund, looking at where money came in, how money went out, and things like that. And then the notes, which are pages 22 to 58, take up a good chunk of the report. That's just really the story behind the numbers. So the notes are there to give you a lot more detailed information. So if you are a numbers person, you really want to dig in. There's lots of good stuff in there. Supplementary information is stuff that GASB and the AICPA believe falls outside of the actual financial statements themselves. But GASB requires some of these schedules, and so we have to put them in there that show information about the district's budget year over year, or how it changes over the course of the year, and a lot of information about pensions, your STIRS and PERS pensions, and any types of retiree health benefits. In addition, the State Controller's Office, who's the agency in Sacramento that receives and approves your audit report, as well as the other 1,000 districts in the state, they require certain schedules to be presented as well, and there's a lot of information in there about ADA and instructional time offerings and some financial trends as well. There's some pages in the report, 73 through 78, where we have to say that we did the audit in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We have to follow government auditing standards. We have to follow the K-12 state audit guide. And we also have to do a federal audit of your certain federal programs. And so those reports are there to say that we audited in accordance with those standards. And if we found any areas out of compliance or any areas of internal control deficiencies, that we would report them to you in the audit as audit findings. And that takes you to the last section, the findings and question costs. There's several sections in there where we summarize our results. But I'm pleased to let you know that there were no audit findings to report this year, no deficiencies in internal control, no non-compliance in any of the numerous and getting more numerous by the year state audit requirements. So, and again, that's a very clean audit. That's about as clean as you can have it. So it is the superintendent's recommendation to accept the 2018-19 annual audit report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you might have.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll begin with Mrs. Prusso.
I don't really have very many questions because I am, as you said, not a numbers person.
Mhm.
So I will be looking at pages 3 through 7 or whatever that is.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say thank you to you for all of the work, and then also thank you to Susan and the people in the district who make sure that this all works. And it's, again, I swim. That's all I do. So it's nice that we have people who know what they're doing and who can take care of this. And I think it's great that it all worked out. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. No other comments. I'd entertain a motion on this.
I move that we accept the district audit as presented by Nigro and Nigro.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mrs. White and seconded by Mr. Rogie to accept the superintendent's recommendation on the annual district audit. Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Certainly. Myself, aye. Mrs. White?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. Crusoe?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Introduce our next.
Mrs. Kinder, you want to continue?
So now we're going to move on to our Measure J audit, which is the bond.
Right, so he didn't get rid of me that easily. So obviously, in addition to the district's annual audit, we audit Measure J each year. Just a brief history, when Proposition 39 was passed in 2000, one of the requirements, in addition to having an annual, forming an oversight committee, Citizens Oversight Committee, requires annual financial and performance audits. So I'd like to just briefly address what each of those means. And the financial audit is very similar to the district's audit, where we look at the finances and we give an opinion on the financial statements, whether they comply with generally accepted accounting principles. And except this one is only focused on the fund where the bond funds are deposited, which is called the building fund. And so just like the district's audit, we give an opinion, and in our case, this case, we're giving an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, again, for Measure J. And similar to the district's audit, it's like a smaller version of the district audit. You've got your financial statements where we present the balance sheet and the revenues and expenditures of the building fund. You've got footnotes that explain more information, more detail, and more history about the district's bond measure, that sort of thing. And then other reports where, again, we have to do the audit in conformance with generally accepted government auditing standards. One of my favorite acronyms in accounting, by the way, which is GAGAs. So anyway, we follow those standards by, in addition to looking at just the finances, we also have to look at procedures and checks and balances, make sure the district's following proper procedures. And again, if we find any areas where the district's out of compliance, or maybe just where there's a significant deficiency in internal controls, we have to report that in this report as an audit finding. So that takes you to the last 2 pages of the report, which is the performance audit piece. Now, most people, when they hear that there's going to be a bond audit, that's what they're thinking of, is the performance audit, because this is where we really look at how those funds are being spent. And even though it's only 2 pages in the report, it's by far where we spend most of the time on this audit. So we look at the bond measure, we get very familiar with what types of projects were permitted, because at the time the bonds were approved, you promised the voters that you were going to do certain things with the money. And so we compare a sampling of expenditures. In this case, we tested about $17.7 million worth of expenditures to the bond measure, which is about 42% of the total. And so in addition to looking at that and making sure the expenditures were in line with what was approved by the voters, we also look at processes like, were proper bidding procedures followed, did the district comply with public contract code? We actually physically walk some of the sites to see the projects, make sure they line up with what we're seeing on paper. And again, we give an opinion as to whether we believe the district's in compliance and followed all the processes. And again, I'm pleased to announce that in our opinion, the district complied with the compliance requirements for Measure J. So once again, a clean audit report on Measure J. And that concludes that report. And once again, it is the superintendent's recommendation to accept the 2018-19 annual Measure J bond audit report. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
We'll begin with Mr. Wenzel.
First, a comment, thank you for your work. I always like the last paragraphs. It says, you know, it comes in our opinion, the district complied with all the compliance requirements, and so, oh, good, I want to see that stamp of approval. I thank our staff for doing such a great job. The public's notice, how long does this take for your audit to do on these two? In days, weeks, hours?
Well, in terms of hours for Measure J or for the?
Let's go with Measure J and then,
Yeah.
and then the other.
Well, yeah, the Measure J one ranges between 50 to 75 hours man and woman time. The district audit's probably around 400 hours total, and that runs over a course of a year. You know, so it feels sometimes like it's over 2 weeks, but you know, we start the planning process in January, February. Go out, visit some of the school sites in the spring. We spend probably 4 or 5 days out here in the district in the spring, and then another week in the fall after the books are closed, and wrap it up. And there's a lot of stuff that happens after we leave, so.
Mr. Rogie?
Yeah, thank you for your diligent work on this and doing both of them. Thank you for staying late. I know it's late. We'll try to in the future, try to move these kind of things up so you don't have to, other people don't have to stay so late, but thank you so very much.
You're a long way from my record, which was 11:30, so.
Oh, well, then I take it all back.
And he made the mistake of saying he likes to come to meetings to get a feel for the district and how we function. So we gave you a great feel today.
I appreciate that.
Any other discussion? Then I would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the formal, the acceptance of the 2018-2019 annual Measure J bond audit.
A second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rogie. It's been seconded by Mrs. Prusso. Is there any discussion on the motion? None. Then, Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
Myself, aye. President Bueno?
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And I
Thank
just
you very
wanted
much.
to, I'm sorry, I just wanted to let everybody know that this will also be presented to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee tomorrow night.
Great.
Not by me, though.
You'd introduce our next item?
Yeah.
Certainly, I see Mr. Verneuil. Oh, okay, I thought he was my cue. Oh, we're actually still with Mrs. Susan Kinder. She'll be presenting for your consideration and approval. So this is no longer acceptance. It'll be approval of the first period interim financial report, which is also positive news.
Okay, good evening again. So we're presenting the first interim tonight. The California Department of Education requires school districts to submit 2 certified financial interim reports per fiscal year. So this is the first one. It's as of October 31st. And then the second interim will be as of January 31st. So our audited beginning fund balance is $11,146,555. We're projecting revenues of $154,528.09 and expenditures of $160,152,452. Small transfer in of a little less than $15,000, leaving us with an ending fund balance of $5,536,786. So if we compare that to your last budget update, which was as of September, it was presented to you in October. The difference is only $26,737. That's to the positive, and that was due to some indirect and direct costs to our restricted programs. So when we do the first interim, one of the most important things in the interim is the multi-year projection. And when you do a multi-year projection, it's the assumptions that kind of caused the projection to go forward. So we use the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, also known as FCMAT, Local Control Funding Formula Calculator, to determine our state funding. We are assuming that our ADA will remain stable for the next 3 years at $13,226. We include all current contract language, and then we remove one-time grants in the outer years. 1.2 million is from the Special Education Preschool Fund. Now that is actually an ongoing grant in the state budget, but the county is requiring us to consider it one time at this point because it is contingent on special ed reform, which we are optimistic that will happen. And we also removed 1.4 million in one-time profit sharing and 3.7 million in prior year carryover and current year donations. The other big piece is our pension obligations for state teachers' retirement system and public employee retirement systems, STRS and PERS. So on this chart, you can see that the rates will increase over the next few years and the projected cost of those increases. You'll notice in 21-22, the STRS actually goes down 0.3%. Although PERS still goes up, so our projected annual increase is only $222,000 that year. So that's something to be happy about. So, okay, so when we look at our multi-year projection, you'll notice that we're deficit spending this year, but it's not really deficit spending. It's because of the prior year, we had restricted balances of almost 4.6 million and a designated balance of about 900,000. So that is a majority of that 5.6 million. In all 3 years, we are continuing to have a 3% reserve. And right now, we have a potential budget reduction of 2.6 million in 2021. And that some of that was due to that 1.2 million, which could become ongoing. So that would reduce that. And much of this could be taken by natural attrition. So this is really early in the budget process, and what we're looking for is really the January budget from the governor. We have heard that the state has had an influx of funding, a lot more than what they had originally projected, so there will be additional funds for the governor to determine what he wants to do with it. So we're very optimistic that he will favor education, but we'll have to wait to see. So we are, excited to go to the governor's budget in January. And then we will have a board budget workshop right after that. And then, as I stated earlier, second interim is as of January 31st and will be presented in March. And it will include updated grant information, any new board priorities that may come from you, and new budget assumptions that whatever we find out from the governor's budget for 2021 and 21-22. So the superintendent's recommendation is that we have a positive certification based on the current projections that this district will be able to meet its financial obligations for the current fiscal year and subsequent 2 fiscal years. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any comments, questions? Just a point of clarification on just for the purpose of the motion, it's written just slightly different. Is there any requirement that there's any type of a verbal read of that motion particularly in the public meeting, or is it simply enough to move the item?
By approving it, we would assume it's a positive certification because you'll sign the certification.
Yeah, I have it here.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if there was a verbal part that was required, the way it's written as a motion. Okay. All right, I'd entertain a motion if there's no other discussion.
Mr. President, I move we approve first period interim financial reports.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Wenzel. It's been seconded by Mr. Rogie to support the superintendent's recommendation on the positive certification first read. Any discussion on it? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. Very much.
Now I see Mr. Vernoy coming forward. And so he is our Director of Student Services, and he will have the next 3 items for your consideration, which are updates or new policies. And also we have Dana Dodge here, and she's our Director of Child Nutrition Services. Right? Thank you.
Good evening, President Bueno, Superintendent Bowers, members of the board. It's my pleasure to bring you tonight three policies. Tonight, our first board policy is Board Policy 3551, Food Service Operations Cafeteria Fund, our first reading. Here is the first posting, and tonight is a first reading. This is a replacement of an existing board policy and administrative regulation. It is required for districts participating in the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program and is mandated to adopt policy addressing delinquent meal charges, which ensures students eligible to receive free and reduced price meals are not treated differently from other students. Some significant changes that are occurring in this policy is that we shall establish strategies and procedures for the collection of meal payment, including delinquent meal payments. And we shall ensure that a student whose parent or guardian has unpaid school meal fees or a student who is enrolled in free and reduced price meal program is not overtly identified by the use of special tokens, tickets, or other means, and shall ensure that the pupil is not shamed or treated differently from other pupils. This policy aligns to our current practices. The superintendent's recommendation is to approve the first reading. Tonight, we do have Dana Dodge, who is our child nutrition director, and she is also here to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
We're going to start with Mr. Rogie.
On the first paragraph, the Board of Education intends that school food services shall be self-supporting. And if it isn't?
Well, so it comes from the general fund if it isn't, but they make adjustments, and it has been a self-supporting for as long as that I've been associated with the district.
Is our intent on this to make that that it will always be self-supporting, or that we want that flexibility of it not making the numbers? I'm asking the question quite badly.
Mrs. White, do you have a
We
comment?
have been known to raise the prices to make it self-supporting. I mean, that's economics.
I guess that is self-supporting if you.
So it is, yeah, and that's
I mean,
how we have done it in the
That
past
clarifies
is continued to adjust our pricing structure to make sure that it was self-sufficient.
And then my other question is, in the past, let's say my daughter wanted, a friend of hers didn't bring a lunch to school and wanted to use her card to buy lunch for them. My understanding is you can't buy two lunches. Can that be waived at the time, or what would be the?
Yeah, if you would, if you
like
could come
to
up and then we can hit the microphone so we can capture it. Thank you.
Of course. So that's a good question. Hi, everybody. I think I've met most everybody here, but nice to
Can you
see
press
you
your
all.
mic?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just, it's the
Okay.
distance, that's all.
So sharing cards, the meal that you go through the line, it actually has to do with the student. So it's really important that the student that has the card is the one buying the meal. Now, if somebody gives somebody some money and that student goes up with their own ID, that's okay, but you can't share cards because the meal that, when you go through the line, it's based on your eligibility, and that's how we charge for the meal. And whether or not it's free, reduced, or paid, it depends on the student ID. So that's why you can't share cards. But you
Otherwise-
can give, I mean, kids can give money to each other, that's fine. But it's based on your student ID, because it all goes back to your eligibility. And in the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast Program, it's, the foundation is whether or not you're free, reduced, or paid.
But a student can buy two lunches if they want.
They can buy two lunches, but they cannot charge two lunches. The difference is purchasing a lunch is different because then you have money on your account. If you do not have money on your account and you're a paid student, you know, you can charge one meal based on the new Senate Bill 265. We have to do that, but you're only entitled to one breakfast and one lunch to charge as a paid student. So the thing with 265 that's a challenge is that any student has to come forth, and we can not deny them a meal, one meal. But more than that, you're not allowed. So you can purchase more than one meal, but it depends if you have money on your card or if you have cash in your wallet, that kind of thing. So.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Ogie. Mrs. Prusso?
I mean, how does this change what we're already doing? Does it?
So the clarification for 265 is that you cannot offer a different type of meal to another student if they're, not paying. So in other words, I forget.
You can't just give them a peanut butter sandwich because
Right.
they
An
forgot
alternate
their
meal.
lunch.
It's called, they call it an alternate meal, like the cheese sandwich, the shame of the cheese sandwich kind of thing. So you're not allowed to do that. The student has to be able to select any meal. So that was the real main change. And then just reinforcing the fact that you can't deny a paid student even if they don't have the money. So that just creates some issues with that over time, but we're going to be doing our best to do what we can to
make sure you get the So could it be possible that I understand making sure that we have meals to people who can't afford them? Might there be people who take advantage of this? There's not really a way to prevent that, or
so there have been some phone calls from parents, that they don't want their students going through the line and say, "Oh my goodness, I make a lunch for my kid every day, and they still want those chicken nuggets or whatever," right?
Okay.
So I called the Department of Education to clarify, because I said, if a parent doesn't want them charging, what are we to say that we have to? And so they said that is not shaming. What they want is it in writing. So we've developed a procedure to follow, and I'm getting that approved through Kelly right now, on basically that, we want to hear from the principal, the parent, and nutrition services all on one email approving that, because the last thing I want is for us to say, okay, yeah, we'll put it on the account, cannot serve per mom. And then the kid is still shamed in front of his friends. You know what I mean? That's the last thing I want. So I appreciated Kelly's perspective that she said, you know what, that's really a principal, pull aside the kid and, in private and say, hey, your mom is saying this, or your dad is saying this. Please don't go through the line unless your parents say you can.
We can still work with families if, like, let's say a kid is, his mom is packing him a lunch every day, but he's still
going
pretending like it's not
exactly.
there.
Oh, yeah.
So we can work with them behind the scenes, but as far as denying a student lunch there in line, you cannot do that anymore. But we can still work with families and parents, not in front of everyone, to make sure that
So we're going to be working on all the details of that very soon. So I'm in partnership with the superintendent.
There's also some communication. So we want to do some pre-communication with families that explains to them that if their bill gets high and they are considered paid, that we're not in the business of bill collecting, but we want to give some forewarning that, we do have some families that just sort of forget and then they don't realize.
Until it adds up.
So we don't want to be in a bill collecting mode. On the other hand, mostly we find people aren't aware. So it's really about information.
Yeah.
I would compare it slightly to the attendance. Sorry, when kids are absent, you send a reminder, your child's absent, we need a note, or your child's late. And then later it increases. So in the beginning, you owe some funds. Your child's been eating and hasn't been paying, but you're in paid status. And we may find that they actually qualify for one of the other status. So that's our first thing, is perhaps there is a struggle and maybe you've changed in status financially. So here's paperwork because the cost of living has gone up. Could be they're struggling now and didn't realize that. So the first thing would be to offer them. And then it may be, increasing reminders of, we do, there is that, we do need to get the funds for the food that your child ate.
So who is going to be communicating
Well, so that's
that
we're
with the
working on.
families, or is that an automated communication, or?
Yeah, we're in the process of making sure that the communication is what you guys want it to be. So we're sensitive to that because once it's out, you know, so I'm making sure that that's perfect before we do that. But
That will fall under your
yes.
jurisdiction.
Lucky me, no. Yeah.
But
I'll
we'll be
do-
working with community engagement on the
Yes.
proper messaging and
Okay.
how frequent. And
Yes.
luckily, we do have cabinet members who have children in our district too. And so we get, we ask their feedback. We'll ask PCIC for feedback.
Okay.
How does this sound? Would this offend you? Or would this make you more likely to pay? We also have, one thing we haven't mentioned, it's not part of our policy, but it's amazing. We have quite a few anonymous donors who every year say they'd like to give and they want to clear the debt for an entire school
Okay.
of people who just have not paid their lunch. And so we also want to let people know if you are interested, maybe you have the means and you're fine paying for your child, but you might want to sponsor other kids too or help them out. And so there's ways to do that as well. So it isn't that everybody's in this situation. It's just a very sensitive situation, particularly around the holidays. We didn't feel that we think it's important to have the policy in place, but we didn't really feel like right before the holidays, we want to say, oh, by the way, you owe us X amount of money for lunches eaten throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogie?
What's the cost of a lunch now?
For
If
elementary.
if I'm paying for it, what's the cost?
For an adult?
not for
No. Well,
as a
you
student.
can buy it. Please come by. No. For high school, I believe it's $4.50, I believe. I
That's
haven't
correct.
memorized it. Is that right? Is
Yes.
that right? Okay, cool. Good.
And
And then
$3.75.
$3.75. Okay, yeah.
And if,
For elementary.
And then what does the state give us for the free lunch program?
Depending on the meal and then state and federal reimbursement, I could go get my claim. I
That's
don't
okay.
have
You
it
don't have to.
memorized.
I don't imagine it's
And-
much.
Right. Well, that's why increasing our numbers for free and reduced eligibility and really reaching out and making sure that, families are aware that the program is not just for food, but also has, benefits outside of the meal program, I think is a great, just reminder because I know that we capture even more students every month through CalPADS and the direct certification, which is great. So we've seen those numbers go up. And we'll definitely keep on trying to reach as many families as we can to increase that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The challenge we have is that they're set by federal guidelines and the cost of living in the Bay Area is not even considered in that.
I know.
So, so someone who might be impoverished in another state, it's a very different level than to be impoverished in the cost of living in the Bay Area, and they have not adjusted that federally.
Yeah.
So that's one of our other challenges, that not just us, but pretty much anyone in California or even the Bay Area has
Right.
to face that challenge.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion on this.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the first reading from the Board Policy Administrative Regulation 3551.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. White. It's been seconded by Mr. Wendell in support of the superintendent's recommendation. First reading. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, myself, aye. Mrs. Pruso?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel? Mrs. White?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Our next item, please.
Mr. Renoy is going to continue.
Good evening. So the second policy I bring before you is Board Policy 5141.21, administering medication and monitoring health conditions. Here is the posting that we have done over the past month. This is a revision of an existing board policy and administrative regulation. Policy updates apply to administration of medication to students and authorizes district to make emergency epinephrine, auto-injectors, and naloxone, hydrochloride, or other opioid antagonists available to school nurses or trained personnel. Again, significant modifications include shall provide epinephrine auto-injectors to school nurses or other employees who have volunteered to administer them in an emergency and have received training. An epinephrine auto-injectors means a disposable delivery device designed for automatic injection of a pre-measured dose. And the district may elect to make emergency naloxone, hydrochloride, or other opioid antagonists available at schools for the purpose of providing emergency medical aid to persons suffering or reasonably believed to be suffering from opioid overdose. And the superintendent or designee shall maintain records regarding the acquisition and disposition of naloxone, hydrochloride, or other opioid antagonists for a period of 3 years from the date of the records were created.
Shirley? Yeah, do we want to finish this or go a little break? Okay, let's take a momentary break if we could, and we'll come back in. Is 5 minutes sufficient for the tech? Let's take a 5-minute break. It's 22:17. We'll come back at 25 after. We're going to go ahead and reconvene at 22:26 here, and we'll go back to Mr. Vernoy. We're closing on this item.
Good evening. So the superintendent's recommendation is to approve the second and final reading from the board policy administrative regulations from Series 5000. I'd be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go with Mr. Rogi.
Can you explain to me what an authorized healthcare provider is? To what point?
So it means physician. It means physician, nurse practitioner. It's someone who is able to prescribe.
Oh, so prescribe. It's not just because I can give somebody an injection.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Any other discussion? Could we clarify one thing? When they're used, will they be tracked, whether it be the epinephrine or the Narcan?
Yes, they're both required to be tracked and kept records to be kept up to 3 years.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? I'd entertain a motion on this.
I move that we approve for second and final reading Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 5141.21.
A second.
We have a motion by Mrs. White. It's been seconded by Mrs. Prusso in support of the superintendent's recommendation for second and final reading on this item. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes. Myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next item, please.
Mr. Vernoy will continue.
Thank you. So our next board policy is 6145.2, athletic competition. This is a second and hopefully final reading. Our first posting October 3rd, first reading November 12th, second posting November 15th, and tonight our second reading. So this is a new addition of a new board policy and administrative regulation. The policy is added to reflect new law, which requires districts to annually provide student athletes and their parent guardians an opioid fact sheet produced by Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. So significant changes, recognizes that the district's athletic program constitutes an integral component of the educational program and helps to build a positive school climate. The board values the quality of integrity of the athletic programs and the character development of the student athletes, and the district shall provide an opioid fact sheet published by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. This does align with our current practices that we do have in place. And it is the superintendent's recommendation to approve the second and final reading of the Board Policy Administrative Regulations. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Mr. Rogi? Okay. We have no concerns or questions, so I'd entertain a motion on this.
Mr. President, I'll move that we accept Board Policy 6145.2, the athletic competition.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rogi, seconded by Mr. Wenzel. I'm supporting the superintendent's recommendation on 6145-2. Are there any clarifying questions on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, Mrs. White?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Motion carries 5-0. Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're going to move into section 13.
Mr. President, I would like to move consent motions, items 13.2 through 13.14. 14, with one, I would like to make a comment on 13.7, approval of gifts. I want to thank everybody that does give gifts. As we've heard tonight, there were several people who do put a lot of money out for things, and all those who just give small donations, like the bicycles, and it helps all our schools. So again, thank you very much, and keep on giving.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rogi, seconded by Mrs. Prusso, to move our consent items in totality. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Moving into section 14, these are consent resolutions. I believe we have 3 tonight. If there's no wish to or desire to move any of them, I'd accept a motion to move 14.2 through 14.4.
Mr. President, I move that we approve resolutions 025-1920, 026-1920, and 027-1920.
I second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rogi, seconded by Mrs. Prusso to move the items. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, myself, aye. Mrs. Prusso?
Aye.
Mrs. White?
Aye.
Mr. Wenzel?
Aye.
President Bueno?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. We didn't remove anything, so we're going to move into 16. Board member reports. We'll begin with Mrs. White.
Considering the hour, I will not go into the details about the good things that I learned at the annual education conference that CSBA sponsors every year. But I will read I guess I would call it the inspiration. Annette Walker from Hayward Unified School District was selected to read the inspiration for the delegate assembly. And she did an awesome job, and I will share the few words that she shared with us. It's the power of I. I will do more. I'm only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I ought to do. I will do more than belong. I will participate. I will do more than care. I will help. I will do more than believe. I will practice. I will do more than be fair. I will be kind. I will do more than dream. I will work. I will do more than teach. I will inspire. I will do more than earn. I will enrich. I will do more than give. I will serve. I will do more than live. I will grow. I will do more than talk. I will act. I will be more than good. I will be good for something, which is a lesson for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. White. We'll move to Mr. Wenzel.
Excuse me. Thank you. First to report out, JV girls basketball had a tournament at Granada, came in second place. We're in the championship game. Unfortunately, San Ramon Valley High School defeated them, but they came in second. Varsity girls are undefeated at this point. It's going to be a tough season, but so far so good in basketball. I attended an event to support cancer research at UCSF, and I'm also involved in a program right now at Granada High School that a group of us are supporting homeless children, students going to the district, the school. We're supporting 10 families and reaching out to, last year we reached out and we got probably 80 sweatshirts to kids that don't even have a sweatshirt for the winter. So this year we're going to be supporting 10 different families, from clothing to debit cards for gas for the family members to get to work, and some other necessities of life. So it's just a reminder to everybody in the holiday seasons how fortunate we are, and there are a lot of people that aren't as fortunate as we are. So now's a good time to just look around in our community and see what we can do to make their lives a little bit better. So happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. Mr. Rogie?
Yes, I'll also not talk too much about CSBA. I thought it was a great conference, made a lot of good contacts. One thing I would like to ask, I've noticed at the high schools that seniors tend to leave at about midday. A lot of them aren't taking classes. I would like to see us try to reverse that. One of the reasons I was telling this to my daughter is it's your chance to take something that you would normally take, and it's free basically for the student. Don't miss those opportunities. I know some kids go to work and things like that, but there are an awful lot of kids that just don't want to take any more classes, and I think those are missed opportunities, and we should encourage them. And with that, I'll end my spiel.
Thank you, Mr. Rogie. Mrs. Prusso?
Yeah, I was able to go to Smith Elementary's Choose Love Assembly and Thanksgiving at Del Val High School, and I was able to visit with at Maryland Avenue for my first visit there to see that school and how it's going, and it was great. PCIC today was about community engagement, and I think everyone was excited about our new, I guess, parent university, maybe you call it, Livermore Learns. That must be the official name now, Philomena, because I just said it. And then also the forward-looking completion of the parent handbook that we're still working on, I think will be great. And then also I learned a lot at CSBA, and some of the sessions that I went to about math, tolerance-free speech, special education, project-based learning, and look forward to talking to people in cabinet about some of the things that I learned. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prusso. Yeah, thanks for the CSBA conference. That was nice. Just for those folks who may watch it all the way to the end of the meeting, this is a good time for the holidays, and a lot of the kids are going to be on a break. A lot of kids depend on the school district for a lot of things, and a lot of that is the support. There's been a focus for a long time, and especially most recently with the social emotional side. So as much as there is joy during the holidays, there's also a lot of stress amongst kids and adults. And I would just want to reiterate to those folks who might catch this, that to keep your eyes open, and if someone's struggling, if someone needs something, the schools are an excellent resource. You can go to your teachers, you can go to the counselors, the school psychologists, the school nurse. There's a vast network of people who are there to help you and to help alleviate any of the stress that might come to you through this holiday season. So with all that being said, happy holidays, enjoy, be safe when the kids are off, be safe, and see you next year. And I'll move to our superintendent.
So thank you. I would also add that it's our last final formal board meeting of the calendar year. So I want to share our collective wish to everyone that they have a peaceful, festive, restful, fun-filled winter break. We want you to be safe and we want you to be healthy. Very important. And in honor of Michael Keel, one of our students who passed, we want you to buckle up whenever driving or being a passenger. Happy holidays, and we will see you next year.
Thank you very much. And with no further business, I'd like to adjourn the meeting in honor of George Atkinson, who lost his life. He was a 2011 graduate of Granada High School, and he passed recently on Thanksgiving. He was a good person. And our meeting's adjourned at 22:40.